Hello and welcome. This is the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale, and we're back to the normal podcast size this week. For once, I have joining me today Josh Torres.
Beware the Ides of March.
Yeah, it's one full week of March down for this podcast. I've got Adam Vitale.
Hello, guys.
And joining us, I think potentially for the first time, we've got Chow Min Woo.
Hey, how's it going?
No, it's good to have you on. It's good to have different, people on so we can get, some different people who have played different things. I heard you're deep into Genshin Impact. And I'd like to actually kind of hear what's coming up for that game because we haven't had a lot of time to devote to the podcast for it.
So, yeah, I fell off Genshin for a few months ago, so you're the only one who's really keeping up with it.
Well, yeah, I guess I could say it's like there's a new patch coming out pretty soon, which is version 1.4. I feel like they're pretty.
I guess we'll go right into it. Why not? So yeah. Normally we yeah. So we'll normally open up the podcast to say it's been a bit of a quiet week. So compared to the last week, we had a whole bunch of niche Japanese RPGs and dungeon RPGs to talk about. Before that, we had Nintendo Directs, Pokemon, Stony State of Play, Final Fantasy stuff. This week, it seems like things have finally simmered down a bit. So we'll have a chance to fill in the gaps with all the stuff that did come out. We'll spend some time to talk about Genshin because why not? And we'll just kind of see where the conversation takes us. So since we've already kind of tripped over the line, let's go into Genshin Impact. So this game is a game that I've followed kind of as an outsider with not really a desire to play. I think it's kind of cool to see how much staying power it's had. So I'm curious to see what is the state of Genshin Impact and how is it going right now, a few months, several months after launch.
I feel like the state of the game is not in a perfect state. It's still kind of new. The game still has the resin problem if you've been playing since the beginning.
These are the limited resources. There's a stamina system in the game. It's like in gacha RPGs where if you want to do this stage, you'll consume this much of stamina, and then you'll have to wait real lifetime for it to slowly refill. That's a similar mechanic in Genshin where normally you can play the game without having to worry about the system, but there are certain aspects of it like boss runs or dungeons and whatnot that'll consume that resource, and then once that's depleted, you can no longer engage with that activity until.
The thing is in Genshin is you still can engage in the activity, you just don't get any loot.
All right, you expend it when you try to claim rewards, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes, you basically have to redeem with resin in order to get your rewards, and this fills in extremely slow. About 1 resin per every 8 minutes, so you need about 60 for a world boss, 20 for instance, and they added a new mechanic where you can exchange 40 of them to condense the resin, and you can use it at any time. You can only use you can only make 3 of them, and the new patch is supposed that you could store up to 5. So maybe that might be a game changer, but I don't know.
It's weird that they're so reluctant of kind of just why cap it so it's such a limited number.
I think it's probably because they didn't have enough content, so they just want to I don't want the player to get too far ahead of themselves, so we'll just cap the resin, and I don't think it's a great idea. I feel like they should let the player just do whatever they want because they don't have enough content.
There's also still growing pains because it launched with these 2 big regions, the Mondstadt and Liyue region, and since then they added a new zone called the Dragon Spine, and that was a snowy area.
Yeah,
I believe. Did they add anything else?
No new areas. They added in version 1.3 they added something called the Lantern Rite event where you're just everyone's just I have a wish I want to make, and they write some kind of their wish in their lanterns, and you try to do a fetch quest for them, and I'm not really a fan of it, but some people are. They're oh well, this does a bigger world building for Liyue, and I'm okay, whatever, right? Yeah. But it's NPCs that you don't really interact with a lot, unless you're so invested in the lore and want to know all the NPCs, then you probably think this is the best side quest ever, right?
And people were talking something about that it recently got, I don't know if it was a limited time mode, some sort of tower defense
Yeah, it comes with a tower defense mode. Basically, you talk to one of the characters or one of the NPCs there. She said that I have built this board game you want to participate in. And once you participate, you play this tower defense game where you set up these towers and the mobs will come in certain waves. And you're not allowed to do any damage to it. Your character does 0 damage. The only thing you can do is you can trigger the element effect on the enemies. So when you have the element effect, they'll die. So you could easily cheese it by going AFK by having all these like was it electric and fire towers or maybe even like freeze towers and just stay there and just don't worry about it, right?
But that seemed to be received well overall. It was like it's something new. People seem to like it.
It's new content. I guess people are pretty starving for content, so they're willing to take anything at the moment.
But that wasn't something that stuck around. That was just still like it only lasted for like 2 weeks or something.
2 weeks for the rewards, and once the rewards are gone, you still could do the event, but you're not getting any rewards. So most people are just like whatever, they'll just ignore it. There's no reward involved, right?
Yeah, and I guess the latest like development in Genshin like happened in China where they had a collaboration with KFC, and so like there were I think pins or badges of Genshin characters in KFC. I think
you also get a glider if you got the code here.
Oh, okay, and that's like the main thing why people lined up. Like there was such a big like I guess Genshin is still growing in popularity. Already,
it's a really big game. I mean, in China, it is massive. But like, I feel like they're just not ready to take on such a large audience all at once. So, and I guess it's just something unexpected, right?
Yeah, I remember hearing one thing that was surprising to me was about the development of the game from MiHoYo. I think I heard that like MiHoYo has like roughly, this is rough numbers, 1,000 people. And like more than half of that is on Genshin. So like at least like 600 people developing the game. Like that's huge. Like that's bigger than BioWare. That's a lot of people making the game. And then of course the other half of they're still doing Honkai Impact updates and things like that. But it's like it really is like a AAA free to play title. So I was a little bit surprising to me. There was just that many people working on it.
And I guess to wrap up the KFC thing, like so many people like lined up even before like the KFC locations and branches opened that it had to be the collaboration had to be canceled because of COVID concerns.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I heard people even like took the was it like the giant banner, like the little paper statue, and they're like trying to sell it on like the Alibaba, like the Chinese eBay sort of thing for like 7,000 yuan. It's like, oh my god.
That's
like,
there's
it's pretty insane
over there. Yeah, it's kind of insane. Is Genshin 1.4 introducing like any new sort of content besides like new characters?
Pardon?
Is the 1.4 patch coming? The update is there anything like new modes or new regions to?
There is no new characters.
Oh,
well,
okay.
There is one. There's a new 4-star, but no new 5-star. So all the 5-stars are a rerun of what people couldn't get when the game first launched, like Venti.
Oh, okay.
And Child, or people call him Targalia, his real name.
Oh yeah.
But we prefer Child because it's what you first known him as, right?
Yeah. I still know him as Child. When they announced his banner and I was still playing, I was like, I don't know what they called Tarta something. I don't know. I know it's Child.
But yeah, they're having banner reruns on version 1.4 with one new character that was introduced during the Dragon Spine patch.
Is the loop still the same though? Like these days, like when you keep up with Genshin, is there anything that you're actually like doing different besides just by the end game? The only activities you can really engage with from when I was still playing was farming like the unique bosses in the overworld, and then doing like your weeklies for the wolf and
I'm sorry, the game structure hasn't changed whatsoever.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how people keep up with it.
I've been trying to tell people, and people are just telling me like it's like, wow, you just got to give it a chance, give it more time. It's like, wow. It's like development takes time, you know. It's like, yeah, I get it, but yeah.
So as an outsider to Genshin, my only exposure to it is that every month or so when a character is announced, and it seems like it always makes a pretty big splash. Like I remember like when Zhongli like first added early this year or late last, and then like there's a new character coming out with a new patch. Which ones have really had staying power, or is it pretty much all just kind of like flavor of the month?
Ganyu is probably the best character that they ever.
Ganyu was another one I remember hearing when they released.
I don't think people wailed on her banner as hard, but the banner that people wailed the hardest from their statistic is Klee. She was the little girl that threw bombs.
I remember seeing a lot of YouTube ads for Klee.
It looks like the new character is Rosaria, who is a polearm cryo character. Is cryo like ice in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Like it's not like in this game one element isn't like the strongest. You've got to do an element reaction to get the most out of it. Like like you use a fire character and you need something else to trigger a reaction,
like a wind, for example.
Yeah, like they'll cause like a fire tornado, or if there's a water character, then you cause this effect called vaporize, or electric, it will be overload. There's like an exploding fire effect, right? So you need to trigger these effects to get the max damage potential, right? I think one of the biggest problems when the game first came out was Earth was kind of like the crappiest element. It's like they just have a shield, but they can't trigger anything. So what's the point? So there was a big uproar with the character Zhongli in the Chinese community because they were like, "Oh, this character's crap, and he's supposed to represent the Chinese god." So we're like, "Okay." He was the only character that got buffed like super hard because of all the complaints. None of the other characters ever got buffed. So that tells you something.
That's surprising to me. I thought they would like buff Earth element as a whole. That's the word that I got. Like,
yeah, they did. They buffed their effects. So from that buff, everyone actually benefits. But his character actually, like, they buff his skill set as well. But people didn't buff the skill set for Earth characters. They just buffed the element, right?
Yeah, so like the only other Earth characters like Noelle, your main character could switch to Earth.
Yeah, like their effects are stronger. It's like playing a Street Fighter game where suddenly there's a new patch update. Like universally, everyone gotten better, but they did buff the character itself.
Interesting. What do you hope that they add like in the next 2 months?
Well, obviously the new region, but
okay. So have they said like any roadmap or anything on when to expect like new places to explore in this game?
They try to keep it a complete secret. Everyone just kind of rely on these leaks that you kind of hold with a grain of salt. Like they're half true and they're half not. So it's like, well, like all leaks, right? If people keep saying stuff, it might be true, right?
Yeah. It's so hard to wait. I can't keep up with the game. Like the content feels like it's drip fed. So it's too slow for me. I think I had my patience ran out.
Like when I'm looking at 1.4, it's like, oh yeah, we have no new region. So we add these mini games as a new mode where you're doing platforming, balloon shooting. Now you can even play a harp with Venti. It's like,
they're introducing like dating sim elements.
Yeah, the dating sim with 4-star characters. Where's my 5-star dating sim?
I guess that'll go over well with the Genshin fan base. That seems to be a feature they'd want.
I do think it's interesting when you say like earlier you were like there's no new characters. Oh wait, there is a 4-star character. Does that like kind of betray like how people think about like your value depending on how you're rated as a character?
I think that's a mobile game set. I've been playing Granblue a lot before Genshin, and if it's a not SSR character, you just completely ignore them. Even though there might be some character that might be better, but that table is so small that you don't really care.
Speaking of Granblue, it just recently celebrated how many years old is it now?
Its 7th anniversary.
Oh my god. Not long.
It's still running.
Pardon? What do you want to talk about Granblue, man? It feels like there's always so many things going on in Granblue.
There is tons of things going on. This year the biggest thing that's going on is there's an anniversary event that involves all the society. The society is this kind of like a secret Illuminati group that goes around killing primal beasts. They're their characters appear in fighting games. All their characters, most of their characters appear in the fighting game. Like we got SaGa, we got SaGa, we got I can't say his name. Eustace. We got Eustace introduced in the fighting game now. I wasn't expecting him because I don't know. I don't think he's that popular. Like
I thought he was popular. That's what from the people that I know that are into it, they're like, yeah, we really like Eustace.
Like he's cool, but he's like that shady guy that you can't really trust. Like, is he on my side? Is he not? He's being really cryptic about it, you know?
Yeah, and he has like that kind of like that, not edgy, but like it's a slight edge look to him where he has like white hair, it's all spiky, all going down, and he's like a gun user. But apparently he was primarily a gun user before, but now that he has like a new like version of him, like that's a new element, and he has like a dagger and a grenade. I think that's what they added for him, and maybe that'll be in his moveset. Incorporate those weapons in his moveset for the fighting game.
Like one of the things that goes on with their storyline that's probably not incorporated into the fighting game is that as the story went on, the weapons kind of broke in one of the events, and they were modified and got new weapons. That's part of the story, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if that applies in the fighting game. Like one of the characters, literally, she lost her sword, and they had to get her like this knockoff, and the knockoff version with the sword is like you roll it, you get the SR version. You didn't get the SSR version. Like they get ults from what happened to them in the story, like their weapons broken or they lost their gear or something like that.
It seems that as far as Granblue versus the fighting game is concerned, like when it comes to incorporating characters, I know they sometimes like release like versions of the characters that have yet to appear in the mobile game. Like Catalina, for example, had the Night Spirit thing with her before that appeared in the mobile game.
She got that really late in the storyline, about like probably 90% like to where the storyline's at before that appears. So and she got it in a fighting game before that showed up. So people were like, wow, spoilers, yo. We were
It's weird how they have to balance this whole thing where even a fighting game moveset can spoil something in the mobile game. And Eustace was the one that was picked over was it Beatrix? I think her name was.
Yeah, Beatrix is probably the fan favorite around the society group. It's either you're a Beatrix fan or a SaGa fan, red and blue, right? So
and then Beatrix will like be added in Granblue versus, but as an NPC or something like that. I think that's what the trailer said.
Like I don't know, it could be like characters for the future too. Like we got Uno or Henri,
that Internal sucks.
And I usually just call him Frieza because of the voice actor. So Frieza is it's playable, right?
The thing that stuck about that is like when they unveiled Uno or Henri. Uno is his like Japanese name, and Henri is his English localized name. When they unveiled Uno, they confirmed that like it was between Uno or Siete, and Siete is like the big fan favorite of this Eternals group, like the strongest of the strongest.
Yeah,
and they're like
fan favorite. Like in this story scene, he basically can like destroy all the Eternal like a duel. Like if this guy goes serious, so he's like the coolest badass, and he's kind of like a goof. So people just like this dork, kind of character, right?
Yeah, but I know a lot of people were pissed. They're like, it was either Uno or Siete, and they chose Uno. Are they crazy? I get it.
Uno. Like nobody. But I guess they just wanted something different. I mean, nobody wants to use the character that is like so unique, and I guess that's their way of putting the unique character, right?
But it seems like I never heard about Uno ever since like they released them. It seems like I don't know if people are like actively using Uno. I'm not. Obviously, like the fighting scene in the West for Granblue versus kind of, as far as I know, kind of on the low end because. The net code for that game it's a struggle.
I think it could be revived. They added rollback netcode. This seems like a hot topic in fighting games nowadays, but I don't know if the company wants to pour in all these expense for it. But they spend a lot of money on promotion. Surely they could spend all that money on rollback netcode, right?
Yeah, on the recent I think I forgot if it was the recent fighting game developer roundtable. Like Katano, from Arc System Works, like announced that they're considering adding rollback potentially to like older titles. So maybe that's in the works, hopefully already. Like I would definitely love to revisit that game if they added rollback for sure.
Yeah, I enjoy the fighting game a lot too. It's just the netcode's kind of unplayable, and the tournament scene wasn't growing because it just released in a terrible time.
Yeah, Granblue. If Granblue came out while there was still a thriving offline scene, like if the pandemic didn't happen at that time, like it'd be in a very different spot these days. Because it's actually cool to see like that game in motion. Like I like watching like tournaments of that game. It's like, oh, this is fun.
So how does Granblue, like, how much longer do you think? Like, is it kind of like how do you say it, the parent of the modern gacha game? And I'm talking about the mobile game here, not the fighting game.
Parent of the gacha game.
Well, I'm basically like, I'm trying to basically draw analogs to my experiences, which are like service type games, like, I don't know, maybe you can consider Monster Hunter or like Destiny or MMOs. I'm trying to think of like, when do you see these games start to like sunlight? But some MMOs around like 8 or 9 year mark, but then I guess there are some that like EverQuest where it still get updates, or Final Fantasy 11. So is Granblue just going to be like a fixture for like still another decade? Do you see that happening?
I don't see it running for another decade, but I see it maybe in another 5 years. That's my take. Another decade's really hard. Like most gacha games can't even keep up for like 5 years, right? So
yeah,
decade would be way too long. But I just think it's more about the story. Like I think it's like the main character goes on an adventure to find his dad, right? And I feel like they're kind of like just holding this off. It's like that his dad is just somewhere else, and it's just like they just keep doing this in order to keep the story going, right?
Yeah, so from what I understand, like the structure of Granblue's like mobile game story is built so it's like it could potentially last forever, because the premise of it is Gran or Jita, depending on which main character you choose, the boy or the girl, they're often find their dad, but along the way they're using an airship to travel from Sky Island to Sky Island to Sky Island. So like new stories and potential new expansions to that story is like, oh, here's a new Sky Island that we happen to visit. And things happen there.
I really don't get that in Granblue though. It's like, oh yeah, we need to go explore this island to get a map so we can find this other island. But yet these bad guys always come up and like to wherever new island you showed up, right? So it's like they don't even have the map and they can always find us. It's like, how is this possible?
I wonder if anyone has been keeping track, like how many confirmed Sky Islands there are at the moment in that mobile game.
Probably way too many, because sometimes when you play a different character side story, they'll be like, oh yeah, we just discovered this new island that has chocolate as monsters.
It reminds me of like One Piece or something, where they just finding different islands with different stuff.
I was actually thinking about One Piece because, like, when talking about like long-running media properties, where the author there, well, he'll like state out like, the story is probably 60% done, which then people, of course, do some basic math and say like, well, if it's existed for 15 years and we're 60% done, we've got 12 to go, or whatever. And I also like, there's another property, Kiseki series, don't they like sometimes throw out percentages where they're like, oh, we're probably halfway through the whole story we want to tell?
Yeah, they do.
We'll talk about that later, but I think they said they're hoping to finish that in like 10 years.
But then there's also like the Final Fantasy 14 route where they're like, the next expansion will be the end of the current story arc. So we're not just going to like keep like dangling the carrot, but then we're going to open the door for a new like era to begin. I guess you sort of also see that with like Kingdom Hearts, where they're just like, okay, this closes the book on this chapter, which is a good thing to like plan for, because then you could decide to end it there, but then you can kind of just like shift focus and continue on as long as it's profitable, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I can never take any percentages that there were. Just like,
I always feel like whenever they throw out a percentage about like how far along they are in their grand plan, like how much have you really like, you just want to kind of give a value that gives enough of a gap that you say like, yeah, don't worry, don't jump off the ship just yet, because we've got plenty to go.
I'm pretty mad.
It feels like at this point, like any series that like does that, like long running series, it's like, as if you're like thinking about like sunsetting the game, and then but you still see like millions coming in, it's like, should we? And then your higher ups is like, nah, hell no.
I'll be pretty mad if the Granblue storyline ends like now. There's like too many loose plot threads that need to be solved, and it's like if you just left me hanging there, it'll be like,
but that's how they get you. They establish these new plot points, right? That originally weren't there. Like it's just that's just like the carrot in front of you. It's like, no, I need to keep this going because you set up all these things now.
They spent like the last story arc setting up all these plot threads, like all these like villains that's supposed to join you from according to their other games. So, and they have, was it one of the characters actually die off screen, and you're like, is that guy dead? Man, that guy is like invincible, man. It's like I want to know. It's like
if there's no body, he's not dead.
That's kind of like what everyone's speculating, but
that's what it feels like for every like mobile gacha game or just any like game in general. Like if that character has died off screen, he's probably still alive somehow.
I mean, that's just general wisdom. If there is no dead body, they are not dead.
I mean, it sounds kind of dead. I mean, this guy got poisoned in a restaurant, and they burned the place down, and they said, "Oh yeah, we got the body," but you don't see the picture, so I don't know.
I don't know. Very suspicious.
He's actually one of the hardest boss fight in the game you can fight, and people make fun of it in like YouTube channels, like, "Oh, it's like this guy died by poison the storyline, but he's fucking immune to poison in the gameplay."
Any cool upcoming things coming to Granblue that they share?
Not unless you play the mobile game. The recent anniversary stream was all about the mobile game, and they basically have like quality of life features that the game been waiting for like 7 years.
Nice.
One of the biggest drawbacks when you were playing Granblue was there's something called the primal summons. You basically, when you get weapons, they get boosted effects when you have the primals linked together, and they would have basically weapons would do 150 times more damage. So that's how you get like the millions of damage in the game later on, right? And they added a new on cap, and there was a huge uproar in Japan about it because the director of the game or the producer said, it's like, well, you need to reduce one of your primals to get it. And everyone's like, what? Do I have to reduce one of my primals to get this? On cap is like, are you going to like Final Fantasy Brave Exvius territory, where you need to draw a dupe SSR to get even higher ascended? And everyone was freaking out. And with the recent update, they said they clarify you don't need to reduce it, but reducing like extras will get it that step faster. You can actually use your own currency to get the currency. I don't know if the producer kind of like just pulled back after hearing all the uproar, or maybe it was already planned or maybe he just stumbled because he wasn't supposed to be the guy that was doing the delivery message, right? Because the director is supposed to talk about that, and he wasn't there in the anniversary stream. They said it was too thick. So maybe the producer just, misspoke about it. I don't know, right?
Interesting. Grind never ends, though.
But some people said, it took them 7 years to have certain quality of life features. So I'm sure they can't pull back that quick, right? That's what some people said, right?
Yeah. The only other thing I heard about the anniversary stream, because that's usually when they kind of provide a roadmap what you can expect throughout the year. They were teasing like a collaboration event with Bobo.
Oh yeah, there's one new endgame boss, and people are kind of excited about that. You could fight Belial, if you remember him from the fighting game.
Fighting game, yep.
He's actually one of the biggest scumbags in the video game. And he's also the best summon you can pull. One of the best summons you can pull in the game. I have friends that one guy literally hate him so much in the storyline, he literally erased that from his roles.
Oh my gosh.
You got the strongest summon, and you decided to throw in the garbage just because you hated this character in the storyline.
That's crazy. The I love Belial is he has a lot of vocal fans and a lot of people who hate him.
He's like a trolling scumbag, but he's also is he on your side? Is he not? It's like one of the anniversary event. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I'll give you this airship if you spare my my friend's life, and you're like, okay, we'll take the airship. Then later on, after, it's like, oh wait, the airship is a time bomb. It's like that guy trolled us.
Nice, great.
Well, it's been cool to have you on, Chow, to talk about these games that otherwise we just don't have like the bandwidth or the current people who are currently interested. Like, interest is not the right word. Currently seeking time into and staying up to date on. No, I mean Josh spends plenty of time jumping from the different gachas that he's into, but right now he's focusing on is it still Princess Connect Redive?
Yeah, I still have Princess Connect and that.
Did our clan like win the battle or something? How does it work?
We ranked pretty well. So how the clan battles work, just very briefly in Princess Connect, is once a month for 5 days. There's a clan battle period, and you and up to 29 other people in your 30 person guild compete against these bosses that have a lot of HP throughout it, and like you're taking hits up to 3 times a day, and then whatever damage you do to that boss is reflective of everyone else's client in the clan. So if I do like 150,000 damage, that'll be reflective of all the other clan members. So there's this string of like 5 bosses that you can clear, and every time you beat them, you get some rewards. And then after you beat the final 5th boss, it'll go to lap 2, where you fight the same bosses again, but they have higher stats, higher HP pools, and whatnot. And everyone has to have 3 full parties of 5 members already built up to kind of do well in that. And your cumulative score for everyone in that clan is tallied up, and you get a global ranking relative to all the other clans in the entire game for like the global version, for example. So, and each reward bracket, for every place you're rewarded out depending on your reward bracket. And we still fell in line within like maybe the 4th or 5th reward bracket, and that's still pretty good. Like it was a very competitive clan battle this time out. This is the 2nd clan battle that's in the global version of the game, and it's been cool, working with the people in the RPG site Discord to kind of organize that together and making sure that like, hey, we got to do our part so everyone else benefits, right?
So you're being a taskmaster.
Yeah. I have a spreadsheet open and making sure you get your hits in. Cool, 2 thumbs up. You did it. And I feel like bad, but at the same time, it's like this is what it has to be done too. Chow gets it because like it's even worse in Granblue, the mobile game.
There's a guild that actually has timestamp cards. So like if you don't check it in, you get kicked out. It's like, oh my god! It's like, is this full-time job in the video game?
Yeah. Granblue has these periods. I forgot how long they run in Granblue. But
it's like 5 days, or actually it's a week. Basically, there's a preliminaries where you just kind of like see how many points your guild can get, and they'll be like, oh, you're a A rank guild, and you'll be fighting A rank guilds, right? The best rewards obviously in the A rank, so everyone just tries to stay there. Then after that, you're pitted against with inner guild, and it's just see who gets more points by killing these mobs over and over again. It's really so boring.
Yeah, they had this event called Unite and Fight in there, and that's basically the guild war in that game. And like I forgot how big clans can be in Granblue.
But 30 members. I'm not sure if that's the same number in pre-con.
Yeah, it is. So that you basically, as you said, it's more direct in Granblue where you're facing off against another guild, and it's a tug of war between like who gets more points on the bosses that they fight, and like whoever like succeeds like gets to like ascend like to the next bracket, and whatever ranking you get, you're rewarded out. While in pre-con, you're not going against directly another guild, but you're still trying to do your best to get a good global ranking reward bracket wise.
Like I think it's better if they just have it like pre-con. Like the thing in Granblue kind of gives it like a bad stigma of how it's being like the most grindiest game ever. It's because of the Guild Wars event. It's people just keep grinding this thing nonstop, right? And you'll be
because like there's unlimited attempts, right? As long as you have the stamina for it, I think. Is that how it is in Granblue?
Yeah. Even some Japanese guild have optimized strategy. You're not allowed to auto. You need to kill these boss manually in the most optimized fashion possible if you want the maximum points. So they'll be like, oh.
So that's a nice thing about pre-con is at the very least everyone is hard capped at 3 attempts or 3 hits a day, not 3 attempts, but like you can only like hit the boss for 3 times a day essentially. On that, while in Granblue it's unlimited. So if they took off that cap in pre-con, it'd be hell. It'd be the worst thing ever. I'd want to die.
Yeah. I guess some people don't want them to take it off because they want to flex their grid. Their grid is their weapons. They want to flex how many millions of damage they can do in like less than 20 seconds. So it's like, if I don't got anything to flex on, then what I am wailing for, right?
It's darkness, dude. It's the abyss.
Any other final thoughts on either Granblue or Genshin or Princess Connect?
Final thoughts. Well, I don't think it's a thought. I think everyone should just join in as a flavor of the month and be a seasonal player because of their roulette system. You come in and you get free rolls.
For Granblue, usually like during their like anniversary events or half anniversary events, like if people want to roll a gacha on a mobile game to like get cool characters and whatnot, they do have like a roulette system where like, hey, you're awarded 30. Today you're around 30 free draws, or today you got this special frenzy where you can keep on rolling until you like get an SSR or whatever.
Well, speaking of roulette, it resets just now. Let's test my luck while we're doing this.
Ciao. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I do my own thing on the Princess Connect thing. I'm still having fun. It's just I'm trying to think of like the next like big gacha game coming. I think it's like the Nier Reincarnation localization, which is, I don't know, maybe cool, maybe not. Oh yeah, I think next month is when this Gaia RPG mobile game comes out in English.
The mobile game, this Gaia?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm really excited for it. I'm interested in checking it out because it's turn based instead of an SRPG. That's what I hear. I don't know if I'm excited for it. I don't know. The same people who are running the English version of that are running the Idola Phantasy Star Saga mobile game in English. And that like recently, I don't know, I think it celebrated its first anniversary and whatnot. I think they're really accelerating the content of that because they're already on, I think, episode 2 of that, and that came much later in the Japanese version, and now it's already here in the first anniversary in the English version. So I don't know.
So moving on, Adam, I do know that last week you had a game that you wanted to talk about, but you were just kind of crowded out because we had, I think, 6 people on the cast. Tell me about Romancing SaGa 3.
So I will just say that I don't know what exactly Square Enix is doing with their current Saga project, which they will reference in their press releases. But I'm here for it because the Saga games are just like a really interesting take on like the Japanese RPG genre that honestly, like, I know this is maybe trite to say, but there's really nothing like them in terms of how they're structured and how they, like, what they contribute and how they work. And so what I've been playing recently is actually the re-release of Romancing SaGa 3. So the Saga series, if you're not familiar, because it is one of Square Enix's probably lower totem pole series just in terms of just mind share, is kind of the series that took off based off of Final Fantasy II. So Final Fantasy II had some interesting gameplay mechanics in how it was operated, and it was directed by Akitoshi Kawazu. And then from there, they developed the original Saga games on Game Boy, which were translated as Final Fantasy Legend for us in the West. And then the Romancing SaGa games on Super Nintendo, which were never released in the West. And then Saga Frontier, and so on from there. So Square Enix has recently released Romancing SaGa 2 and Romancing SaGa 3 on pretty much everything, like Steam, PlayStation 4, Switch, Xbox even, and mobile devices. So yeah, pretty much everything. And I talked about Romancing SaGa 2 in a podcast maybe like a month, 2 months ago. So now I'm on to 3. And let me just set the picture here, because each Romancing SaGa game is pretty different. So in Romancing SaGa 3 specifically, you pick one character out of a set of 8. These are like 8 bespoke created characters. And after a short opening section that is unique to each character, you are basically placed on the world map, and you are generally tasked with not like a specific goal, but just like, there is an impending doom coming to this world and you have to stop it. Now pick a direction and go. It's not very well, stated that poorly. It's not like the game is directing you and holding your hand like you have to go in this direction or you have to do this thing first. It's just kind of open, free form, like just explore, talk to people, see what happens. You'll run into different story quests, you'll run into different dungeon areas, different bosses, and eventually the story that emerges kind of just emerges more naturally rather than having it like driven to you like more traditional Japanese RPGs do. And I honestly find that really cool. I saw one person describe it as JRPG Skyrim, because
but I have to point out you have not played Skyrim.
I have played open world RPGs, just not Skyrim. But it's just you basically just it's a type of game where you have to enjoy and allow yourself to just wander. If you need somebody to tell you where to go, Romancing SaGa is not for you. You have to just basically explore and find what happens, and I really appreciate that. It's also got just the cool Saga-like combat systems that are pretty common throughout the games. I played Saga Scarlet Grace when it released back in 2019. Actually, just released shortly after this remaster did. And I can kind of see, the common, DNA between these titles, even though they were released, 15 years apart or whatever it was. And it's just a really cool game for those that really like digging into like exploration and mechanics. And the story is there, but it's just more like a story light, background impetus to continue through the game, and you kind of just discover it as you go rather than having it being like the driving force behind the game. And so the reason why I'm playing this now is because Square Enix recently announced the Saga Frontier remaster. Yet another remaster in the series coming out in like a month from now, almost exactly.
Saga fans to keep winning, dude. That's what it is. Saga
I'm happy about it. It's one of my favorite franchises, and I will always shield them if I can.
Yeah, so yeah, I've heard many stories about Unlimited Saga, and apparently like 98% of people don't understand how to play it.
It's very difficult. I would look up a YouTube guide on how to play it, and I still wouldn't understand it. It's like an unrefined Scarlet Grace. You have a character can take like a larger action, with the stars and Scarlet Grace.
I would have tried to start like explaining it. I can't do it.
Yeah, you also got slot machines.
I've heard it's sort of like a JRPG take on like a tabletop game.
Yeah, you get a board game where you explore, and you'll be like, oh, in the board game you're moving certain blocks, and it'll be like, oh, you step on a death trap, you die. Now you
it makes more sense if you imagine that there's an imaginary GM kind of pointing you through it.
But like, for example, in Romancing SaGa 3, just as an example of like what you sort of run into. So early on in one of the first cities you kind of find yourself in, and again, you can kind of go like anywhere at any time. So it's very freeform. But like in one of the early cities you find yourself in, you run into a blacksmith, and the blacksmith lady there is basically like, I need to avenge my father who was murdered by a rogue and took, the matriarch spear, which is like this holy spear. And then you can recruit her to your team, or you can have her work the workshop too. And that kind of gives you bonuses either way, depending on what you do with her. And then later you find out about like one of the characters that you start with has actually lost like the matriarch's sword. And then in another spot on the map, you run into a bandit who has basically I don't want to get into too many details, but you kind of have like these different storylines that emerge sort of from different angles. And eventually this bandit that you find, you learn is related to the bandit that killed this blacksmith's basically master. And eventually you can, by just talking to NPCs, kind of going through the different storylines, you find out where they are, and you go through like this whole dungeon up this tower to find this bandit. And it ends up like with this kind of really neat sequenced boss battle that appears there. And it's like a really cool sequence, really challenging. It's fun on that regard. And the thing is like, that is all completely optional. You don't have to do it. It just kind of emerges out of just exploring, talking to people, recruiting people. By the way, you can recruit, like there's 8 main characters, and you can recruit most of them at any time. There's some limitations. And then there's like 23 other characters you can recruit as well, like the bandit, like the blacksmith person. You can recruit a lobster, you can recruit a snowman, you can recruit an elephant. But what I'm getting at is like not only just the exploration, but just like how you construct your party and how you like approach the battles is all like completely up to you. So it's really cool to kind of just put things together, try things out, see how they work. And it's just really satisfying in that regard. I've sort of said this before, but Saga games are great if you are not afraid to just try things and make mistakes sometimes and understand that like maybe you're not putting together the absolute best top tier min-max party, but you just got to try things, figure it out. Sometimes you're going to maybe fail sometimes, and like maybe I need to adjust how I'm setting up my party, or maybe I should come back to this story section later and explore in a different direction first. And I just really appreciate that. Just overall with the Saga series, they kind of all share this similar design. I'm an engineer in my day job, and it sort of, I think, tickles my engineer brain, just kind of playing with it and trying things. And Saga games just really do that better than most other series I've played. So I finished.
So what's your verdict? 3. Do you like 3 better or do you like 2 better?
So Romancing SaGa 2 is quite different in that it's still pretty open world, but you don't really pick like a character from a set of 8. And also it has this whole like generational system in play that 3 does not have, where you basically explore a bit, and then once you've like in Romancing SaGa 2, once you've completed enough of these storylines, which again you kind of do in any order, the game will basically jump ahead like 100 years or whatever, and then you're like playing as the next generation of characters in the same world, and sometimes things change, sometimes things change or stay the same, and it kind of ends up being a pretty messy system, to be honest, but it's also like weird and interesting. I feel like Romancing SaGa 3 is a little bit less weird, a little bit less messy, but also a little bit less interesting because it's just a more standard open world, explore in any direction. There's no like generational jumps or anything. Once you recruit a character, they're basically with you forever, or you can get rid of them if you want. So I guess I would boil it down that Romancing SaGa 3 is a little bit more like well constructed and a little bit neater, but it's also just a little bit less interesting, if that makes sense.
When you put it in this perspective, I would be thinking, Saga Frontier is basically a more refined 3, I would say, and Saga Frontier 2 would be a more refined Romancing SaGa 2 if you're looking at it this way. There's a generation system, right?
It's weird, right? It's just kind of when the jumps happen, it's kind of random. It sort of affects various things. So sometimes in Romancing SaGa 2, you'll get a generation jump when you're not really expecting it. Like, oh, okay, now I'm 100 years later, and so some things might change kind of when you weren't expecting it to. From what I understand from Saga Frontier, which the remaster is coming out, it's you still pick from 8 different characters. It used to be 7, but now it's 8 because they're adding a new character.
Yeah, it's Fuse.
Yep. Who I gather he was in the original game as a character, but he wasn't like a selectable main character. Is that right?
Yeah, he's this cop that just kind of comes in and just scolds at you. It's like, okay, well, what's your problem, dude? He's not really a fan favorite.
Yeah, I heard he's just kind of like this no nonsense cop or whatever. But what I understand from Saga Frontier, and tell me if I'm wrong. So the 8 different characters you pick in Romancing SaGa 3, they have like a slight change in their like perspective and how their like intro works. But once you actually get into the meat of the game, it doesn't change that much. There's just some few slight differences here or there. But it seems like in Saga Frontier, each of the characters actually has like their own goal, their own unique final boss, like their own little storyline that is unique to them. Whereas Romancing SaGa 3, it's like each character kind of ends up in the same storyline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Basically in the Saga Frontier, it's like everyone has their own intro, but their middle game's always the same. But the end game is different. Everyone has a different end game. They have a different last dungeon, different last boss.
So that's different than Saga 3, where it kind of once you get to the end game, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, like the middle is kind of like the same. Everyone would be just doing the side quest to kind of trigger what needs to needs to do the end game, right? Because basically in SaGa Frontier, everyone has their own prologue. You're kind of introduced as prologue, and that's your end game goal. Like you play as Blue, his end game goal is that he needs to kill his brother, and it's like, well, what am I gonna do? It's like that's your middle game, and the middle game is to do side quests in order to trigger this thing, right?
I forget what was it. It's always the same side quest that's needed to trigger the.
Yeah, you basically had to collect all the magics, or you fight all like the magic lords or whatever, you know.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
So you do that, and what's really kind of cool is like every route is so different in a weird way. Like a Celis route, you don't really have time as your luxury. You just can't go, oh yeah, I need to do my side quests, you know, and just blow up in time, right? Because there's assassins that are trying to kill her, and you'd be like, and you have no idea when they can occur, like a real life assassination attempt. And what else? There was also the worst route, I would say, is loot. I think I probably ranted about it a few times in our staff chats, but loot is the worst route. His route is kind of like incomplete. He has like no storyline, and
they're gonna finish it.
Wow, it sounds like they may finish it.
I hope they do, because in the original game, it's basically it's like, oh yeah, you do the intro and you just can go straight to the last boss dungeon, and that's it. But you'd be too weak. It's like, oh yeah, there's not enough events doing this, so I'm like level 1 and I had to fight like a level 50 end boss. What do I do? It's like you're screwed. So what you do is like you just gotta do all this boring fetch quests for him to grind him out so you could get ready for the last boss. And I think hearing that there's a new game plus feature may solve loot's problem in the remaster.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see how that, like, what all these new additions are to the game besides Fuse. Like, they're saying, oh, there's new events, new stuff. I'm so happy that they're getting the chance to just finish the game they wanted to after all these years. That's crazy still.
And it's also interesting that Legend of Mana is also coming out later this year, which is a Mana game by name, but it's kind of like the most Kawazu touched Saga-ish Mana game as well. So it's sort of...
Yes, we're never getting that Xeno game remastered. I mean, the Xenogears remastered with the...
Xenogears is weirder because Monolith Soft is now at Nintendo. So it's like, if it were to be remastered by Square Enix, it would be like completely different people doing that. So
yeah, unless they somehow like collaborate with Monolith Soft and like agree to like either a Switch type exclusive or just Switch Forever exclusive or something. But I would love to see Xenogears get that Saga Frontier remaster treatment, like being able to complete the game. What the fuck does that game look like when it's actually done?
Yeah,
what does this 2 look like?
Right. But yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm still I find it just interesting how every time Square Enix like does like a press release for their Saga series, quote, what they'll put in their press release is, quote, part of the ongoing Saga project from Square Enix that has so far included Western releases of Romancing Saga 3, Saga Scarlet Grace, and Romancing Saga Re-Universe, now comes Saga Frontier Remastered. So just like it's interesting to me that they actively specifically mention that like there's some Saga project that is like some coordinated effort to do these remasters. So I wonder if that'll ultimately lead to maybe a Saga Frontier 2 remaster and maybe a new game. I mean, Scarlet Grace wasn't that long ago. I guess the original version was 5 years ago or whatever on Vita. But I just kind of find that interesting that they specifically note that.
Hey man, that's what happens when you get as powerful as Kawazu in Square Enix. You can just do whatever the fuck you want. Apparently,
I just kind of find it interesting that like I don't think the Saga games are. I don't think it's a stretch to say they're not as popular as some of Square Enix's other franchises. But easily. I guess they just give Kawazu some freedom to kind of just do what he wants, and he's kind of the brand manager. But there's also the actual director of the games is I forget his name. I interviewed him at E3 once, but like Kawazu's sort of like this supervisory, like major, like boss of this franchise, but there's other people below him that are sort of directing the new games and whatnot.
Well, he's definitely the face of it. Like just like
right, he's definitely the face of the whole franchise. But I guess
there's just some nondescript suite in like some floor of a building where it's like this is Kawazu's pod, where like they just throw money in and like you just keep the Saga ball rolling, just keep it up.
And I mentioned in previous podcasts,
this is Kawazu's pod.
I mentioned in previous podcasts, it's also interesting that like Trials of Mana did exceeded expectations for them. It's sold more than 1 million, and obviously there's a Legend of Mana remaster coming out, and it's like those two franchises for a while there they were kind of dormant, and now they seem to be, remasters are not, maybe the most interesting thing, but the fact that there's some life in those franchises is pretty cool to me.
Yeah, I'm still blown away that Trials of Mana remake reached 1 million. Like, it makes you wonder. It's like, can Legend of Mana do that? I don't know. Can it?
Legend of Mana is a lot weirder. It's very cool.
Yeah.
It's also Shimamura's best soundtrack. I'm just gonna clarify that. So it's very good.
I think Secret of Mana could hit those numbers if they actually like put a little bit more effort in their remaster.
The Secret of Mana well is already cursed. They already fucked up once.
So. Yeah, that remaster was just.
Yeah,
I think they learned their lesson. Actually, I interviewed the Mana people as well, and once they saw the reception to the Secret of Mana remaster, they were like, "Yeah, we actually have to put more effort into these. Like, we can't just put a paint coat on it and call it a day and make the music terrible." God, Secret of Mana's redone soundtrack is literally like, what were you thinking? Anyway,
it still hurts.
Yeah, that's one reason why they at least, it's maybe not the most high budget game, but they at least gave a little bit more effort to Trials of Mana remaster or remake, excuse me, and that seems to have done pretty well for them. So who knows what they'll do next?
Can you imagine if somehow inadvertently the Trials of Mana remake became like the next Nier Automata? Like, oh, Mana is now a priority big franchise for us at Square Enix, like how Nier Automata did.
Well, I mean, okay, if we are talking about Square Enix Japan franchises, I think we might have mentioned this in a previous podcast. The top 3 for the longest time were Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, and now Nier Automata alone kind of punched that up in possibly the top 3, definitely top 4. And it's like, what would be under that? Mana or Saga?
Probably Mana.
Yeah.
Mana used to be like the biggest action game until like the Kingdom Hearts come out, then everyone just forgot about it. It'll be like,
oh yeah.
Well, Dragon Quest 11. When you mentioned this, I wanted to look this up. Dragon Quest 11, as of TGS last year, sold 6 million, and we recently learned that Nier Automata was 5.5 million. Now, I don't know the specifics about like what that includes for like 11S and all that other stuff, but just trying to very much ballpark. Where does Dragon Quest sit with Nier? And it seems relatively close. Speaking in a very broad term, where imagine saying that before Automata wouldn't nearly be true.
Do you remember if Square Enix still holds the tradition of like Dragon Quest releases in Japan where they have to set the release date on Saturdays for that in Japan? Is that still a thing?
I don't think so.
Because I know
popular.
It was a big thing back then because people used to skip school.
Yeah, skip school and like call out of work for Dragon Quest. That's what they used to do.
But I think it's been so long that people just don't really care about that tradition anymore. I think that's, it's been that long,
That was
I don't think it's possible now with COVID regulations, right?
Oh, absolutely not. They wouldn't dare do that anytime soon. I mean, Dragon Quest 12 is still so far out that you'd have to hope and pray that we're past this current period in time by the time Dragon Quest 12 is out.
Any other final thoughts on the Saga series or Romancing Saga 3, Adam?
I was actually looking up a calendar for July 29th, 2017, which is when Dragon Quest XI first released in Japan. So that was a bit before it released in the West, and that was a Saturday. So Dragon Quest XI's first release, which was PS4 and 3DS, was a Saturday. I don't know about the re-releases, but
there you go.
As of that, it was still a Saturday release in Japan.
What a great tradition.
So I guess the last person to go would be. Oh, did you have? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that was just my final thought. Like, I really enjoyed playing through the Romancing Saga games. I haven't played the first one, which has a version on PS2, Minstrel Song, which is like a remake of the original Romancing Saga that I might play next.
Watch the Wonderswan version.
Watch them like announce a remaster for that as soon as I finish it or whatever.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen these days.
Mm-hmm.
So Josh, I think you're the last one to go because I have nothing to contribute because I haven't been able to play much this week. Okay. I know that you recently put up a review for Gnosia, which we talked about at length Yes, not yesterday, last week. So,
or maybe the week before. What was it, last week? Oh yeah, it had to have been last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to set the plate for you, but I do kind of just want to hear like what your final thoughts are on Gnosia. Or Gnosia. Did we ever decide that?
I just call it Gnosia because that's the easiest for me.
Me too.
I don't know.
Yeah.
When I first came into this game, I didn't know what to think of it, and even for like the first maybe, I don't know, 3-4 hours of it, I was like, I don't know about this game. It's very, it's very questionable because there's a period of time where you have to get used to the structure of the game. You have to accept it for what it is, which is it's going to be a highly repetitive game because you're going through these time loops, and in each of these time loops, you're doing this, werewolf or mafia style like party game every time, and it's one of those things like, oh, I'm just doing this again and again and again, and along the way, I'm kind of raising these stats. I'm kind of learning some of these skills, but like you feel kind of wanderless, or you're just wandering around. You feel aimless, and there's something about it. It's like I don't know if I have like the will to go on, if I can stand this type of game, type deal. Like I was definitely in that kind of boat for a little bit, and as I played more and more and more, it has this weird sensation that it's one of the very few games, like even RPGs. Like sure, when you start out an RPG, like you're not doing, your hits aren't doing that well, but like by like the 40 or 50 hour mark, you're like, oh, I'm like dominating these enemies, and like that's your standard RPG thing of just getting stronger. But the way that this game handles it is, since all your stats are meant to like enhance your abilities to play this game of werewolf better among people, and you're playing as a player insert character, like you have a more powerful like connection with that, because they're acknowledging you as a character in that game. You're not playing as necessarily a silent protagonist, because there's no voice acting in the game, and you're all you're really doing when you're communicating with these characters is, sometimes in that game of werewolf, you're doubting for someone, you're covering for someone, or you're using your skills, sort of like debate tactics in it, and you're just giving like very simple responses, but you're being acknowledged that you are a person in that game and whatnot. And so as you progress and get better at this game of werewolf with them, you're actually able to like swing conversations and being able to like get a good read on like, okay, people are trying to get rid of this person that I want to protect. So since my stats are pretty decent, like I have a good chance of like getting the heat off of them. And it feels like pretty rewarding that like once you get to a point where you're very confident in your abilities, and that's something that most other RPGs don't allow for, because you're not really a player insert in that character in that game. Even if you're like have a silent protagonist, it's not actually you, it's that person. While in this game, it's actually you.
Well, I was gonna say, it sounds like a Western RPG or an immersive sim. Not all of them, obviously, like Witcher or Mass Effect, but some of the more first-person ones.
Yeah, but in this one, your characters have like a portrait. Your only representation is like as a color symbol that you kind of like a marker at the beginning of the game. But in each of like those Western RPGs, like that main character still has a design. So in everyone's mind, like and for marketing purposes, like they're like, even though that's like that be a player insert character, they still have a design that everyone identifies them by. Well, in this game, you don't have one. So it kind of have, for me, it felt like there was a closer connection. So the point that I was getting at is just, it feels good to really like put a lot of time into this game, and like being able to feel like that you're actually part of it. And it's a strong sensation that brings, especially when it comes to like the later parts of that game, where there's actually goals of like, you're so connected with this cast now. You spent a lot of time with them. What their personality is, what their quirks are, who they like, who they dislike, and so there'll be like a main narrative emerging from that game the more you play, and a lot of the hurdles in this main narrative serves as like kind of like boss battles or escort missions, where to get the next part to progress in this main narrative, you have to protect this person and make sure this person goes into cold sleep, and making sure none of them get eliminated first along the way. Like if you're going down that path and the person they have to protect is eliminated by chance, like it's a no-go. You have to wait till the next loop. And there's just something about that, like it's super irritating and frustrating, because you're like, I did everything right, I have all these stats, and like and just by the luck of chance that like they were the ones that was eliminated first. Like you feel frustrated, but at the same time, like that's how the game, like I don't know how to really put this into words. That's how the game communicates that, like, this is like the burden of a time traveler. This is what time traveling must feel like if you're trying to like finally find out, like, some sort of narrative thread behind why you're time traveling in the first place now. And that's such a cool feeling that like a lot of games don't really communicate well for me, because you're basically like a spectator in that story, while this one you're an active participant, and that you have now formed such a strong bond with both how the game operates and the participants in this game, that like you just feel like that you now share that frustration that other cast members that like must feel when they have like these backstories that may correlate to your current circumstances and whatnot. And it's like it's such a cool thing. And I don't know, writing the review for that was like a challenge, because it's one of those things that you don't want to spoil for people as well, because you want them to feel the same way that you felt, or potentially like you don't want to spoil that feeling and whatnot, because the way that like that emerges in the game is such a cool concept, and I think they pulled it off pretty admirably. And like I said last time, and that this game isn't for everyone, because that's the whole game. It's a repetitive nature. It's looping and looping and looping again. Like I ended the game roughly around 160 loops in, while my other friend, he's like near 200 loops. He was near 200 loops, and there's just a variance to it as well. It's a luck of the draw in some instances, whether you're able to like, get to the game earlier than some others. And that's like, it sucks for them, but in other it's like, oh, interesting. And the way you quote unquote obtain the true end in this is like it's just a smart way to convey it as well, because like the true end, like it's not necessarily like something that's like you'll immediately think about going to, but once if you consider what happens in like the quote unquote normal end of that game and think about it, it's like, oh, this makes sense of like this is how they would convey it, and that true end actually like completes that circle that the game is trying to tell. It's so cool. It's so cool. I love it. I love it. It was great.
It is such a hard sell though, because like I'm trying to like draw analogs. So you heard me mention immersive sims earlier, and I'm like, what other games is this like? I've never played Werewolf or Mafia or Paranoia or any of those like social deduction sort of like tabletop, or usually with the assistance of some sort of like cards or whatever way you visualize it. How do you format that into a video game?
Yeah, like especially when you're like especially when you're taking like traditional RPG systems into the game, and then you're introducing like X factors in there as well to really muddy up the rules a little. It's like when you think you know something, like 2 or 3 more things pop up. That's like, well, it could potentially be this then if question mark.
And when you mention something about like a true ending, normally when I think of that, I think of like there's a set of criteria you have to meet, and then like you're rewarded with the best possible ending, or the most closed book ending for a linear story. And again, you mentioned the participant versus the spectator, and it's like how does an ending work as a participant versus a spectator? Like, yeah. I don't know if there's any other better way to describe that.
Yeah, it's a very unique experience. I hope more people get a chance to play it and give it a shot. It's so tough. It's so tough to like convince you. It's like, no, man, it gets so good, and then you're like, you're insane. You're kidding me.
One of those games where you're just like, trust me, just trust me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. it's cool. I'm glad that the review's up and that people enjoy it.
So we have that on the website right now. It just went up this morning. So go ahead and read Josh's full in-depth thoughts on Gnosia. I'll have to read it myself to see if I can try to elucidate exactly what this game is.
Yeah, I hopefully I gave a decent rundown. Adam edited. He didn't tell me that it was a confusing mess, so hopefully that's a good indicator.
You mentioned this in the podcast last week, but how it basically is a logic puzzle, and based on what the conversations you have, and based on previous loops, and based on how you set it up, trying to get, trying to isolate and pinpoint certain bits of information to try to continue from there.
So I do know that Josh and Adam had dived into, back in our Discord here, you were screen sharing another game that came out recently that we haven't actually covered on site, that you ended up feeling kind of strongly about. I want to hear what your experience was with a few hours of Loop Hero.
Oh boy. Okay. How do we set this up? Loop Hero is, I don't know yet if it's like a traditional RPG in a sense.
Well, it's not, but how do you describe it?
Okay. So picture this. It's hard to do this without a visual reference, so I'm going to do my best. So at the beginning of the game, when you hit new game on this, it is the story premise is that the world has been engulfed in darkness. It's like visualized by this black goo or slime and whatnot. You're like, okay. And then your main character, this woman, wakes up in darkness. And how the game is presented is that imagine like a rectangle dirt path. Just does these dirt path tiles forming a rectangle, and then you have this your character kind of walking down this dirt path, and so the surrounding environment is all darkness. It's just this character, which is represented as like this white pixel art sprite, just walking down that path, and you have no control over that. And then along the way, you'll see a slime on that dirt path. And it's like, okay, they run into it and it engages in this battle, but you have no control over it. It's all auto battling. The slime hits you, you hit it back and whatnot, but you have no control over this. Then after this, she'll continue just normal on that path, beating up enemies along that way. So there is two modes to this game as you're playing it: an adventure mode, which keeps the action going, and a planning mode, which pauses the action. Now, what you actually have control over are her equipment and cards that may drop from enemies along the way. So if I'm beating down the slime and I beat it, sometimes it'll give me like armor or a weapon, and then I can equip it, and she'll have better stats and whatnot. And then sometimes an enemy may give me cards, and these cards can affect different things along this path. So let's say I beat down the same slime or another slime, and it gives me a meadow card and a vampire mansion card. So this vampire mansion card I can place down at the kind of the edge of the dirt path. And what that'll affect is, hey, now on this tile that it's connected to, vampires may appear in random battles of enemies that are slimes that may appear in that path. And then what the benefit is that vampire may give you better weapons, better equipment, or like useful cards for you. And then this metal card that was also rewarded to you, you can place that at any at like the outer edge of that dirt path. Like, remember when I mentioned that this dirt path is just surrounded by pitch black because that's just the story premise of the game. Now you're kind of like building some sort of geography on the edges of that any tile set that's like black that like you desire, essentially.
And basically what you're doing is you're affecting what appears on the path. That you are basically traveling down this path, which is literally a loop, and you have to there's no turns. You have to go down the path, but you can affect like what appears on it.
Yeah, and so like this meadow that I placed now on the outer edge of it, it's not on the path itself. It's just one of those cards that you can like build geography out of the way. Now that'll have like passive effects, and this meadow card, like just by placing it down, you regain +2 HP per day. Now this day system, there's a day and night system in this game. Where in the upper left corner, there's this little sun icon with a meter that will gradually fill up as the game's in adventure mode as it's moving, and as that fills up, it'll get to a point where hey, the day is done. So once it's done filling up, it'll give you HP the next day now that the day has rolled over, and that'll also respawn monsters on the map as well. So you have to.
And you want to fight monsters because they have a chance of dropping either cards or equipment.
Yep. So that's the only thing you can really affect in this game in terms of like what the player does. It's just you're setting down cards and now and equipping equipment, and all this equipment like affects different things like an evasion, a counter stat, defense stat, even like a vampirism stat where during battle you can like regain HP from each hit and whatnot. So you're kind of optimizing or trying to formulate some sort of build for your character.
It's kind of, I know people might get mad at these sorts of comparisons, but it kind of is like Diablo-ish or any sort of loot RPG where it's like you get a drop and you really hope that it fits the sort of build that you're building. And sometimes you make hard decisions where it's like, darn, I got this sword that is a lot better, but it lowers my counter rate when I already have like a really good counter rate. I don't want to give that up for a better sword. And so you kind of have to make these sorts of split decisions, pretty frequently. Like it's literally like after every other battle or so, you're kind of constantly putting on new loot and stuff. And that's where the sort of roguelike randomness comes into play, where you have no control over what drops for you. And some loops you might get a really good drop, and some loops you might just end up getting shit. But you make the decision of like what you're gonna stick with and what you're gonna just discard. And it's sort of that fun mix of randomness and decision making there that seems to be clicking for people.
Yeah, so after every loop is done, like after you make a lap in this rectangle, like you can continue to move on, like go to a second loop, and every consecutive loop, enemies get harder. They get higher HP. They hit you for harder and whatnot, but they can also drop better stuff the more you loop. And the main reason you want to continue looping is there's a meter underneath the day meter where it slowly fills up to spawn a boss. That's kind of like the time till the boss appears and whatnot. So you're trying to construct a build that will loop long enough to spawn this boss, and hopefully you've built your character up at this point to withstand this boss. But you can also retreat as well in each loop. And how this is every time you start a loop, you start at this campfire tile. If you make it to that campfire tile and retreat, you get to keep all the resources 100% that you've gained. You can also retreat when you're not on that campfire tile, but at a penalty where you have to give up 40% of the resources that you gain, so you only can take back 60% of this campsite that I'll describe in a bit.
So basically, you want to retreat at the campfire to get the best take back, but you can retreat at any time if you absolutely need to at a penalty. And the reason is if you end up dying in a loop, you get the largest penalty. So you want to avoid that completely.
Yeah, and the largest penalty is you can only take back 30% of the resources that you've obtained in that run. So there's this risk reward factor to it where you're thinking like, do I want to keep looping to get more resources, or do I want to stop here to at least maximize the amount that I've gained so far? Because I don't think I'm ready to I'm prepared to take on another loop of these like monsters that are more powerful. And keep in mind, like, there's all sorts of cards. We've only mentioned the Vampire Mansion or the Meadows, but there's also like other sorts of cards that can spawn unique enemies, like a swamp tile that you put on that dirt path, like that can spawn mosquitoes and whatnot. And it kind of takes weird inspiration from, well, we just mentioned Legend of Mana, Where in Legend of Mana, you had like this map feature where you can like plop down landmarks that you can go explore. In this one, you're plopping down like unique tile sets that'll do different things. Like that's a swamp card will spawn these mosquitoes, and then this graveyard card will spawn skeletons. So you're crafting a map of like how you what you want to deal with along the way, and whether you have like the resource, whether you're confident in your resources to take on this enemy path that you've built along the way. And also with these enemy cards, there's those environmental cards that I mentioned. Like there's these mountain and rock cards that you can obtain too, where you can actually build a mountain just on the edges of the screen, where you can when you build these tile cards, every time you plop them out, you raise your max HP with these mountain and rock cards as long as they're positioned adjacently from each other. But if you set them in a certain formation, it'll actually establish like a mountain landmark where you'll get a big boost to your maximum HP. But harpies also start swooping down from that mountain that you just created and whatnot. So there are consequences as well to the bonuses that you gain on it, and whatnot. So there's this whole.
And there seems to be other there are other things as well. Like you got like village cards, and these are cards you had to unlock. Like you didn't start with them, and there's probably a lot more to unlock that you haven't even gotten to yet. And so you started placing down village cards, and what they do, like at a face level, is that they heal you every time you pass them. But you actually unintentionally put a village next to a vampire mansion, again, because you can place them wherever you want. And apparently, if you do that, and you didn't know this because the game doesn't like explicitly tell you this, is it created like a ravaged village instead of a normal village. And what the game tooltip said at that point was like it summons like zombies or whatever, and they're really hard. But if you can survive that for 3 loops, it says something good will happen. I don't think it got to that point.
No, I didn't get to that. But it was a really funny instance. It's even thought of to the point that like the position where you place these like some cards respective to others will create like a sort of like a lore thing around them. So like when we place that village card by the vampire mansion, like there's even like that in the tooltip where there's like an even like small story bit that says like, oh, this village was like ravaged by the nearby vampire and whatnot. And
that kind of mixes with what you said about like risk reward. Like you can build a mountain with the cards you get, and that raises your HP, and it also gives you resources, but it also makes it so harpies start appearing. And who knows, maybe getting a ravaged village and saving it or whatever you do, if you loop around it enough, might give you like a really good reward as well if you can do it. And then there's also like villages can also like create harder monsters. They call them like quest monsters that are, of course, they're more difficult to take out, but they give you like better equipment occasionally. So there's a lot of risk reward in the game. Also similar to like, should you retreat at the campfire, or should you try going for another loop and hopefully not dying? So
yeah, and then the other half of this game is, once you retreat, whether you're at the campfire tile or not, there's this whole base builder aspect to it. So early in the game, you meet other survivors in this, torn world where you're just trying to band together and survive. So all the resources that you obtain from your run, you can accumulate those so you can start building facilities at this campsite that you're in. So you can build, like early on, you can build what was it? A blacksmith, a farm, a gymnasium,
storage depot.
Yeah, storage depot, and all these
supply depot things. Or something.
Yeah, like building a blacksmith early on, for example, makes it so as soon as you start a loop, normally when you start a loop, you wouldn't have anything, but the blacksmith lets you, gives you like a basic equipment, like a basic armor, a basic sword, and a basic shield. So at least,
and you also created the gymnasium, which unlocked like the RPG side of the game.
Yeah, that's also a weird part too, where we didn't know like it had RPG stats, but like, okay, can you get experience points? So one of the early facilities that you can unlock early on too, like unlocks an experience meter underneath your HP meter. So every time you beat monsters, you're gaining experience. And once that meter fills up, you don't necessarily level up, but you can choose one of 3 traits and these traits can be like, you have a chance to stun your enemy after a weapon swing, like a 35% chance or something and whatnot. So not necessarily like you're buffing your dude up, but they're tweaking and alternate ways to tweak or enhance your experience with your current build and whatnot. And after you build facilities in this campsite, there's a chance that like they may unlock cards. So like building like a farm, for example, unlocks the wheat fields card, and so now you can like put wheat fields at this village card that I think another facility unlocks. And so when you put these wheat fields around the village, it'll enhance the HP they give you every time you go over them. So it's a very systemic RPG or systematic RPG where there are systems that really entangle with themselves with another, and a lot of the game is finding out those how each card or each system like may affect one another. Like, for example, a good way to accumulate resources in this game is also in that kind of cartography, building the geography out, where you get this treasury card, and it cannot be placed adjacent to any other card. But if you surround it with other tile cards, whether it be rock, meadows, or mountains, if you're able to surround that from making a square around it, you'll get a big bonus to the amount of resources that you gain, and can also give you a lot of good equipment as well. So you have to start as you're looping. You're also thinking about, should I save these cards, hoard these resources?
You want to place them next to a treasury, so like you might get a bunch of meadows, and like if I get a treasury, then I can plop the treasury down and then build a bunch of meadows around it and get like a huge bonus. Or like, should I just place the meadows right away without the treasury?
Yeah, so. and the risk reward there is meadows. When you place them down, like I said earlier, it gives you additional HP when the day tides.
So holding on to them lower, basically you're keeping HP off the board.
Yep, exactly. So it's hard to. Hopefully, we did a decent job sort of describing this game. It makes a lot more sense once you see it and then start identifying the user interface elements, because things will click like, oh, okay, that's how that works. But the way it's kind of, you have to present it verbally is tough. I think it's a very interesting.
It's definitely the type of game. When you like look at, like, I remember when this game was first announced and like some of the early trailers for it, it's just hard to decipher, just even from like a quick glimpse of the game, like what is going on here. Like there's just so much on the screen, and it's not like, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it's not the type of game that just immediately intuitive sells itself like, oh, I know what's going on here. I see exactly what type of game this is. It's really the type of game you kind of have to play it and see it, and like then you can understand like what's going on. And it has, if we step back a bit, I think it has like a really enticing like treadmill, if you will. Like every loop that you do, you're getting better, you're getting resources, you're unlocking stuff to make the next loop easier. It's very roguelike in structure that way. So I can see why it's clicked on with people, where, you know, that sort of one more run type of mentality. And even if you fail, and even if you get creamed by the boss like you did, you still gain something out of it. So for the next run. So
yeah, like I've only spent a few hours of Loop Hero so far. I sort of get most of its systems now, unless they really throw me for another loop, you know. And
another loop.
But it's an interesting game, and you know, might as well get it out of the way too. But I'm very surprised that like it's caught on to the point that they've already sold 500,000 units. Just they announced recently.
Like in a week. That's pretty nuts. Yeah. I mean, it's like a $15 game, so it's not like it's a full price thing, but still, word of mouth is great.
Yeah, and Devolver Digital is publishing it. I don't know the developer's name off the top of my head, but congratulations to them. You know,
4 quarters, overwhelmingly positive on Steam.
Yeah, so it's a very cool game.
I have a copy of this, and I'm going to try to find some time to play it this weekend.
Then you'll understand. It's like, oh, but everything they said makes sense. Got it. I don't know. I've been running the treadmill of like games that are very difficult to explain. Like Gnosia is different to explain. 13 Sentinels is difficult to explain, and now Hero.
Well, 13 Sentinels, you did a good enough job because you got me to play it, and I liked it. All right. So, does anyone else have any other games that they played this week before we go on into the news section? All right, moving on.
I think we're good.
So this week there was no major headline, so the order here is going to be a bit random. At the top, we are going to talk about Kuro no Kiseki. So this is the newest upcoming entry to the larger Trails series following Trails in the Sky, Trails of Cold Steel, and we don't know what the English name will be for Kuro no Kiseki. Its official website went live in Japan earlier this week. We got our first information on some of the characters, like their names and their affiliations. We got a glimpse of the kind of the two-part battle system because it does do the hybrid action / turn-based, similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake. We got a bit of screenshots of the locations in Calvard where it takes place. So I don't know, like where do we
Calvard arc? People have been wanting Calvard for the longest time.
Yeah, because obviously it was a big focus even early on. Like one of the party members, Zin, of the first trilogy of games was, kind of the I don't know, mascot's not the right word, like the representative from that area. And here we are, 15 years
Zin.
later or so. Yeah, was it Zin or Zane? I know they changed the name.
It's Zin now.
Yeah.
So
it used to be Zane. Like in the first localizations of it, it was Zane.
Hummel became.
They eventually
Hamel
just decided that name was actually poorly. Like Zin is the more accurate translation, so they actually just they edited it to be Zin always. So,
I think they were trying to give them more Western sounding names, and it just didn't work out because they're like the Eastern Oriental side, right?
Yeah, they're kind of like the generalized East Asian sort of style to it. So I guess how do we unpeel this onion? Like, what do we think of what we've seen so far?
We finally got the official names for the announced characters, like the.
All right, we'll start with characters.
Yeah, so the guy at the forefront of this, the one with the blue coat and the gnarly hairstyle, his name is Van Arcide, age 24.
That's weird. When I read that, where does the syllable split? Is it Arcride or Arcride?
Yeah, I don't know. Age
I think the Japanese website actually has like the English name written out. They do that.
And then
I cry for you, like the song.
And then the other lady that was one of the other two main characters that was revealed, the one with the red beret, blonde hair. Her name's Agnes Claudel, age 16, and she has
that sounds. There's something about that just sounds like, yep, that's a Kiseki name, Agnes Claudel. That like, if I was given that name on a blank sheet of paper, I'm like, is this a Kiseki character? There's something about it.
Yeah, there were other two new other characters that were actually the other one. One of them isn't actually too new, but the one that was like brand new, never seen before, was this 13-year-old girl who has like a long scarf, and like has blue hair and like a headband over it. I think her name was Fairy Al-Fayed.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has a sword and then whatnot. And the other one, the other one was initially revealed as part of the collector's edition for Hajimari no Kiseki. They kind of gave like this special illustration teasing this Kuro no Kiseki, this Calvard arc. Everyone at the time kind of thought he'd be the main character because that's the first like indication of what it was. Okay, he looks sort of like Crimson King in Ys 9, but his name is Aaron Wei, age 19, and his weapon is called the Twin Fencer. He's kind of like a dual blades type of guy. And
is this like a big story thing? I haven't played Ys 9 because it would be like Crimson King.
He looks kind of like
he looks kind of like it. Yeah, like that's the premise of Ys 9 is Adol can transform into the Crimson King, in it, kind of like a superhero.
I know people were joking that like this is where the East stories and Kiseki stories will merge. The Adol is actually a Kiseki character the whole time or something, but no.
Yeah,
they had to merge with other storylines first. It'll be Nayuta no Kiseki first.
Oh boy, and yeah, they're releasing like a remaster of that soon in Japan. So the other tidbit about these characters is they're teasing the other 4 more characters to be announced in Kuro no Kiseki soon, and their ages are 20, 15, 22, and 69.
So the main character, what was his name again? Arcryde was the last name.
Van.
So he's 24, which is the oldest any Kiseki character has started out as for protagonist.
How old is Kevin in third?
Oh, that's a good question.
How old?
He was the oldest so far.
It used to be oldest as Kevin to start with.
Yeah,
I was thinking just Estelle, Reen, and Lloyd.
Because they're all teenagers. But Kevin is not.
But there's like popularity polls that they've done recently, and Kevin didn't even make it to a list. Kind of sad.
Apparently Kevin was. This is according to legendofheroes.fandom.com. So I don't know how reliable that is, but apparently 22 in third.
Okay. So still younger.
Yeah. So the normal gamut of ages here is still late teens, early 20s, with the 169-year-old in there. But I know we've seen other JRPGs do that. Like one of the Tales of Zilla games has like Rowan or whatever. Like I don't know. That doesn't.
Rowan is a cool character in my opinion.
I guess I do have like Malik as like your kind of 30-ish-year-old guy.
And I think the
anyways, to talk about the series we're actually talking about.
Yeah, the other things that they showed off for Kuro no Kiseki is the capital city of Calvard Republic, the Edith, and this is very reminiscent of what you might find in Crossbell, but it's more metropolitan. It's kind of more what you'd find in a modern city. They actually have cars. They have like the it kind of looks a little bit like New York urban style.
Mm-hmm.
Environment, and they showed off a little bit of video clips of how the battle system is going to work, because when they had the official site go up, that they were showing like brief clips about how it looks in motion and whatnot, and it kind of looks pretty slick. I kind of like what they're doing with it. I was surprised at how seamlessly the action battle system and the turn-based battle system switched together. Like I didn't even notice it at first when they switched over to the turn-based side.
There are some parts of it that still look sort of stiff. Like some of the enemies were like pivot in place to face character. And then like if you watch like the feet of your allied party members, like when you're like locked on to an enemy, they're like doing this weird like crab walk strafe sort of thing, where it's like, I'm sure this is early and it'll be cleaned up. And like, I'm totally nitpicking. It looks like better than I thought it would after them doing, the same kind of similar turn-based positioning style battle system for a long time now. And
that broadly gets to like my overall thoughts on this, is that I think this series kind of needed just to try something different and new, just shake it up a bit, just because like we had 4 Cold Steel games that kind of all work the same way. I know each one like added a small little gimmick, but they're basically the same. And then Hajimari, I haven't played yet because it's not in English yet, is still pretty similar, and it's honestly not that much different from what Trails in the Sky did, more than a decade ago. So I think it is kind of nice just they're trying something a little bit new and a little bit different with how the combat works here, and the fact that the cast of the whole series has been bloating for a long time now, and obviously that's still there. But I'm kind of hoping this game kind of just, if we focus on this new cast, and maybe they can like get a little bit more focus, a little bit more development on these characters specifically before we introduce them to like the gigantic cast of characters.
Yeah, just wait until Chronos like a soft reboot, where they start doing all the cameos and bloating it back up again.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this how
cameos, but
I think they mentioned how I think he was tell me if this was a mistranslation, but at the time when this game was originally announced, they said like, if this game doesn't do well, we will not do this again, in terms of like the follow-up. Like it feels like they were a little bit hesitant on like, we know we're changing things up, but we're not sure how the fan base is going to take to it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I don't think anything has come out that debunked that. They said that this whole series is dependent on like selling consistently, like doing at the very least the general same numbers, the average. Like if it ever like dipped down drastically, that they were like, we're not gonna do it anymore. Because that makes sense, because this series like really depends on a loyal fan base to keep on keeping it like steady. Like I can't imagine like this. I don't know if it'll find like new players. Maybe it will now that it's like a new entry. Yeah, because it was an interesting statistic, but but it makes sense in retrospect. Like Falcom had their 40th anniversary stream, and they held surveys, on various questions on like, what was your first Falcom game? What's your favorite character and whatnot? And I think it ranked either second or third as their first Falcom game, but Trails of Cold Steel 1 was, for a lot of people who took that survey, that was their first Falcom game. So obviously, like that kind of the soft reboot that Trails of Cold Steel did, which in retrospect wasn't, that got them into the series, and you would hope that the people who got into it, played the prior games to better understand, like, what Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 and Hajimari did, because those are entries that playing older games is now vital to understanding their story.
I mean, you have to imagine that, like, there are current day teenagers that were only like 7 or 8 years old or whatever when the first Cold Steel game came out, and like there's a potential fan base there that's like, we want these people to play these games, but maybe they just never got around to them because they were too young or whatever, and like, so every once in a while they kind of have to do this like new arc where it's like, we hope our existing fan base continues to play it, and we want new players to jump in here, and maybe they'll go back and play the older ones. So I do think this sort of move was definitely necessary, and especially for a long running series. And we'll see what happens.
The thing you mentioned earlier, this is actually something posted on Silicon Era in December from Kazuma Hashimoto, who has previously contributed to RPG Site, said it was mentioned that if this next installment underperforms, referring to Kuro no Kiseki, there will not be a sequel. So I do trust Kazuma's translation, so you still have to wonder, like, what's the context in which the statement was made? How coy is he being? Just because he says there's not a sequel doesn't signify any larger implications for the series as a whole. So there's still like a lot of like footnotes you got to put in there.
Yeah, I think it'll be like Zero no Kiseki. Because in that game, it has a pretty self-contained story by the end of it. So
it's a really good game. So you would hope that if it is going to follow in that footsteps, that's really encouraging.
Because it's like a self-contained story. If there was no sequel, it has a pretty satisfying conclusion, right? So you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm okay with that. But if the game sells well, they could make a sequel, and it'll be like, I'll no Kiseki, right? So
I think like at the time, like Ao no Kiseki being announced was surprising because as you mentioned, Zero no Kiseki had a pretty conclusive finale, and like it was self-contained, as you said. So like Ao no Kiseki being a follow-up was like, oh, they're gonna revisit this again. Cool. I mean, Ao no Kiseki is really good. I think it's really, I don't know. We're gonna have to reserve judgment for the final product, obviously, and how this actually performs technically on a console. But it seems like the results of the new engine that Falcom is using for Kuro no Kiseki seem promising. The visuals are really clean. I really like what they've shown so far of that. And if this is the engine that they're going to use going forward for all their titles, like imagining what East would look like on this engine, like that's really promising, because East 9 is definitely visually rough in a lot of respects.
Now, one thing that's interesting is that Kuro no Kiseki technically doesn't have platforms announced yet. Right. So who knows if it'll be like PS4, PS5, maybe they'll do a Switch version. I don't know if the new engine is
wait till 2023 with Nice America.
But yeah,
we can.
I know like Hajimari is actually technically Hajimari is already getting a PC port in China. They've done that with a few of their games, but like, who knows what they kind of plan on doing. I know when Cold Steel 3 released and it was PS4 only, it was a little bit of a sluggish selling game for them because of, did I say PS3? I meant PS4. It was a sluggish game for them because it was no longer on Vita, no longer on PS3. and so the fan base, they're literally limiting, the platform base that could buy it. So I'm sure it's done fine since then, but they had to make that decision to kind of go new platform only. So who knows what they'll do going forward.
And you basically lost half your fan base because you'd be like, oh yeah.
Like, I mean, it would be an even harder sell if they were to like decide Kuro no Kiseki is like a PS5 exclusive, because PS5s are still, especially in Japan, it's still pretty hard to find a PS5. Like,
I doubt it will be, but eventually there's going to be a game that's no longer going to come on PS4. Eventually.
Just tell them to go back to PC, go back to their roots.
I know.
Well, you look at like the media create like sales number in Japan, and I know this is a very generalized statement, but just how much dominance the Switch has had there. Just the home consoles in general there have kind of been like, I don't want to say struggling, but they kind of have like a low ceiling and just like how much presence they have.
Yeah, so because because like Switch is like the only modern handheld platform or allows for handheld play now, and that's a big thing in Japan. Like, when you think back, like PSP always did well in Japan, DS and 3DS,
insane,
yeah.
Just the environment they're in. I mean, they often like take trains to commute to work or whatever. So it'll be like, oh, this is my spare gaming time. It's at the train. So
yeah, so it makes sense now that like push comes to shove, PS5 and Xbox Series X don't have like their companion, or Microsoft never did it, but Sony doesn't have a handheld presence anymore. Nintendo's the only one that has that, and it's their main thing too. So of course, Switch would do super well in that context. But it's hopefully from the get-go, Kuro does come to Switch. Now you don't have to wait for a later version. That's the hope. And also announced that their 40th anniversary live stream at Falcom, they announced that Trails of Cold Steel is getting some sort of TV anime project, completing the circle now that Trails of Cold Steel already felt like an anime. Now it really is an anime.
I think there's actually a strategy. I think this is not like super insightful, but stuff like this, as well as like the World Ends With You anime, I feel like not only are those perhaps just money making opportunities to begin with, but it's kind of like opportunistic. Hey, we have a new game coming out, whether it's Kuro no Kiseki or The World Ends With You 2. Like, if you haven't played the games that come before it, you could always watch the anime as like a shorter, more condensed version of it to catch you up. It's like kind of like a selling point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's more like a kind of like a medium just to like promote their other products. Kind of like maybe.
That too. It's kind of a double purpose, right? Like, there might be people who are interested in the game but want to watch the anime to catch up, and then there might be people who just watch the anime even though they have no idea what it's about, and like, hey, I like that. Hey, there's a game coming out, So
and there's also like just tremendous merchandise opportunities too on that. Like, whenever you get a TV anime project, like you're just thinking of like, oh, I'm gonna sign so many partnership deals. Like, I'll have like so many like FIG announcements or so many other avenues to like promote this as well. I think it's interesting though with this Trails of Cold Steel one in particular. Unlike The World Ends With You, that's actually adapting the events of the game into TV anime, there's been like talk of the way that it's been worded around this project, where the Trails of Cold Steel one might be like an all new original anime that like portrays like events that weren't like maybe in the game or a different perspective and whatnot. It's hard to say at this point whether how they're gonna do it. There's no studio announced yet for this. Like, obviously it's already been decided on behind the scenes, but they're not ready to announce it. But the ones that brought this, like the partners that are bringing this to life, are like User Joy, which are the ones
running their gacha game.
Yeah, User Joy is like the ones behind Akatsuki no Kiseki, the gacha game, and also the Chinese ports for the of all the Falcom
games.
Yeah,
E6 was it that recent? And
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if User Joy is behind that one, but I know like for Hajimari and the Trails of Cold Steel, like PC ports in Chinese, like they're the ones behind that.
I think like the original Memories of Salsetta PC port was that too, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like before XE did their own, they had one.
Right
in China or
so
Japan or whatever.
They have a long-standing partnership with Falcom in their general Chinese presence, and also Funimation is also directly involved with this Trails of Cold Steel anime announcement, like their global branch and whatnot. So whatever
I just hope I'm not being pessimistic, but it's like I haven't seen many decent like anime adaptations that are based on RPGs. I think the only good anime adaptation I ever seen was a Street Fighter 2 movie from the 90s. The anime, not the real life one with, but we're talking like the 90s.
There are certain adaptations that seem to just come and go, and I don't like hear much about them. Like Persona 5, like is that anime any good?
It was okay, but it's a condensed version. So I think the coolest part about the Persona 5 ones was their openings. Their openings were really good.
That always sounds like a backhanded compliment to me, though, where it's like at least the opening was good. It's like, well, what about the show?
I can't say much about the show. I watched the show and I'm like, it's okay, I guess, but the openings were cool.
One anime that seems to be like perhaps even preferable to playing the game, like in all respects, is I guess Tales of Zestiria, because that game is shit.
Oh, wait, actually, I prefer that the anime over the game.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I totally forgot that happened, but yeah, UFO Table really did well with that anime.
Like I'm just thinking like some really bad ones back in the day. Like we got the Tales of Eternia anime. Does anyone remember that one?
I remember that. Hey, Xeno SaGa, that got an anime.
Oh yeah, is the Ace Attorney anime any good?
What? No.
Didn't Ace Attorney get 2 seasons even?
I think so, but I watched like a bit of the first season, like maybe halfway, and I was like, oh, this is funny. But
there's a Star Ocean really anime as well, Star Ocean X.
Okay, that one is really funny because it only it covers like a very like maybe like a third of the first game, and like I forgot exactly where it stopped, but it was definitely not the entire game. It was only a small portion.
Where's my sequel? I was like, I'm looking forward to get to that location.
Jeez, man.
There is the Castlevania, call it an anime if you want, even though it's not created in Japan like completely, but that's done well.
That's pretty done well. I don't know if it really depicts the event. Like it doesn't really.
It's its own thing though.
Yeah,
it's kind of like its own spin on thing. I mean, like even the character designs are quite different. Like Isaac or whatever, he looks totally different from his game counterpart.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm looking forward to The World Ends With You one because the not even just like hoping they adapt the game faithfully. Like I'm hoping that's the case, but the visuals of it really strike out. Like they're being very faithful.
It has a unique style.
Yeah, like when people said, "Oh, like a good chunk of this is CG," is like, "Are you kidding me? This CG? Wow."
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other final thoughts back, reeling it back to Chrono Kiseki? The only thing that I see that was detailed on the website that we haven't mentioned yet is basically what is Van's role, what's his affiliation. This is according to the translation from Gamatsu.
Not bracers.
Yeah, basically they're the Spriggans or Spriggan. I don't know if it's plural or not, which basically are like detective negotiators, bounty hunters for like underground job requests, where bracers are like the public facing, guild that everyone like respects and looks up to. These are like they do the dirty work. They're not bracers.
It's a weird combination of like what your role is in the Zero and Out series, where you're like an actual detective agency, kind of like Hops, and like and obviously with the Trails in the Sky series, where like you're bracers, you're kind of like freelancers almost, but you have an association.
And people joke how it's like throughout the Trail series, it's like you're bracers, and then you're just like police bracers, and then you're like school bracers, and now we're like underground bracers.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
and it works with the gameplay system. Like this is why people ask you to do quests and why you go exploring and things like that. So
and why we can still like do this weird gamey thing of like rating you up at the end of chapters and giving you like a letter grade.
No, I just love like you miss all the side quests for Zero, and it just makes Lloyd look like a complete idiot.
I need to play those now that they've got the fan translation from the what's the name of that group?
But he is like a total smartass. If you're like did all the side quests right, it's like he's like ace detective now. It's just like totally different.
On the other side of the pond, the other big news of the week, and this is kind of a more general topic, is that the acquisition of Bethesda by Microsoft is basically now complete, final, signed off on, stamped, sealed. And the first result from that is that a ton of Bethesda games, including several RPGs, are now available on Game Pass across PC, console, and xCloud. So this includes like Elder Scrolls 3, 4, and 5, Elder Scrolls Online, Fallout 4, 76, New Vegas, as well as Prey, which is not really an RPG, but is a really great game. You should play it. Doom, Dishonored, Wolfenstein. So I don't know if we have any other comments on that. There's kind of been a lot of will they, won't they in terms of big announcements. Like they had a kind of a roundtable discussion a couple days ago, which was just kind of like going across the backgrounds of the deal and everything like that.
I mean, that's great for Game Pass users for sure. That's a hell of a library to just get dumped on you on one day. It's like this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of games that like you can just check out, see if they're for you, and if not, then cool. That's amazing. I'm really excited for like to see where this partnership goes and what that'll entail. Like it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, acquisitions in video games of all time.
And Adam, you can finally, if you have a Game Pass, you can play Skyrim, and you can finally make the comparisons to Romancing SaGa legitimately.
Well, at least he's missing out on Elder Scrolls Online.
I've heard Elder Scrolls Online is actually like, it started out in a really rocky place, and they actually had, I forget if it was like a blog post or a newsletter, where they kind of like actually had a bit of a reminiscent where they said, yes, we know we struggled out the gate, but over the years, they've kind of really turned the ship around. And you might say that's them patting themselves on the back, but I see a lot of good talk about it, and I do kind of want to get into it. And I do know that people kind of poo-poo on Skyrim for being like dumbed down or casualized. But I just, when I play those games, or even recent Fallout games, there's no one else is really making those sorts of games, at least not to the same scale. So I do think that, like, I am glad that Bethesda is around making those, even if it takes a decade between entries. I should also go, like, this is the theme of the podcast so far, but I do want to go back and play like Oblivion at some point, because I do hear so many good things about it. But that, like, I wasn't quite as big into Western RPGs when Morrowind and Oblivion were the hot topics. Were you going to say something, Adam?
No.
Oh, yeah. I guess people aren't interested in this, so maybe we'll.
I mean, it's cool to see like the ZeniMax Online Studios turn the ship around on Elder Scrolls Online, and it continued to grow. Like they got, I think they recently mentioned they got 3 million new subscribers like last year.
Yeah.
2020 alone. So, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to be happy. Like, that we're able to pull through. It wasn't easy. And sure, people may interpret it as like patting themselves on the back, but they should. It's their main product. It's their main thing that they're working on. You don't want them to like. Everyone's benefiting at the end. Like the player base seems to be perfectly happy with what they're doing these days, and that's fine. Let a game be as healthy as it is, and be happy for them.
I just hope. So I'm probably one of the more Western RPG focused contributors to the site. And I just hope we're at a place in like 5 years or so where we can jump from Obsidian to InXile to Bethesda to CD Projekt, hopefully kind of gets things turned around. And we have like a good, strong, consistent slate rather than kind of having like these droughts of where we have to talk about the dire situation with like Bloodlines 2 and stuff that we had to talk about a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully we're on the path towards a situation like that.
I want to see a resurgence. I hope Unavowed is like amazing. I'm really pulling through for that in the Obsidian side.
Okay, I don't know how we're going to segue to this next one, but during a Game Live Japan stream about a week ago at this point, we got an announcement for a surprise crossover that I don't think anyone was expecting. We've got Senran Kagura meets Hyperdimension Neptunia in Senran Ninnin Ninja Taisen Neptune. So
wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I couldn't get it out my first try.
The sad part is like that's not even like the full title of this too. It's like Senran Ninnin Ninja Taisen Neptune : Shoujo Tachi no Kyoen.
We definitely failed that test.
And then the genre for this is described as a Net Ninja Wars action RPG. So this was a part of the trio of like game scoops that Dengeki and Famitsu were advertising for this game, Live Japan. One was like new characters for Samurai Warriors 5. The other was like a Q&A session for Project Triangle Strategy that didn't really reveal anything new about that game. It's more of a what did you enjoy, and like what the amount of players went through this path. Like, you know, yeah, it was nothing really new. It was like, oh, okay, but yeah, this is kind of on the Senran Kagura engine that Estival versus Burst Renewal were on, kind of that fast-paced action RPG, but now you can play with the Neptunia characters as well, and they all interact in the story premise. They showed off like, you know, Neptune's new outfits, both in her base form and her goddess form. Obviously, they're more kind of a kunoichi style thing where they're like female ninjas. So they get new outfits. The Senran Kagura characters seem to be in their old outfits. They nothing new for them, but for a lot, like the Senran Kagura fan base seemed to be very excited, at least because they were fully expecting not getting a new Senran Kagura game at all ever since the Kenichiro Takaki's departure from Marvelous, because he departed, I think, back in 2019 to Cygames. And the last thing that he put out as like a contractual obligation with Marvelous was that Kandagawa Jet Girls game that had both an anime adaptation and a game, and that was like a cross media project and whatnot. And like it's not really my thing, but I don't know if people really warmed up to that or not. I couldn't say. But you know, Takaki since then is still at Cygames. He's like a producer at Project Awakening, I think, and has somewhat of like an advisory role at like Granblue Fantasy, the fighting game Versus, and the upcoming RPG Relink. So he's still there as far as I know. So I don't know if he's like involved at all with this. He has to be, I imagine, just another partnership deal with Marvelous. And people are, I don't know. I mean, it seems okay, I guess. Seems cool.
I mean, it won't be like they're alive, right? Like Itagaki, you know how he's gone. Like they kicked him out, and you know it's my baby. They can't ruin my franchise.
Oh yeah. Maybe he isn't. I don't know. I don't know if he has any involvement with this, but they showed off just the very small tidbits of like of this game. Like obviously it's an action RPG, so it's very fast paced. You have the adventure parts where the Neptunia cast and the Senran Kagura cast are interacting. They only showed off. I already forgot the Senran Kagura character's name, but they showed off Asuka. Yeah. They've only confirmed those two. They're teasing like, you know, a brand new original character for this game.
Yeah, they even got the voice actress to promote her. It's like, oh, she wears black and she's a princess-like character, and that's all I can tell you. It's like, oh,
yeah, okay. It's Miko Ito. She's kind of a rising star in the voice acting space. A lot of people love her role as Kokoro from Princess Connect because she has a very soft voice.
And she plays as the best. What is that word? As a twin, technically, quad twinblets or whatever that show is called. The best girl.
Oh, not the Omega Quintets. I forgot. I know what you're talking about. The
Miku.
The quintessential quintuplets, right?
Yeah, I don't know what we would call one of the siblings. Do we call them a twin? But no, they're not twin. But
yeah, she's one of the quintuplets of the cast. Like, yeah, so yeah, that's
she's a very popular voice actress. If anyone's in the anime scene, they'll know what she wrote.
Yeah, I guess the for me the most like enticing part about like, you know, the Senran Kagura cast and the Neptunia cast like interacting is you can have like Seiyu jokes because Asami Imai voices Noir, and what was her I forgot her role in Senran Kagura, like I forgot already, but like you can have like that sort of joke of like, oh, she's voicing both of these characters and whatnot. And Asami Imai is pretty cool. I like her as a voice actress. So I don't know. They're gonna say more about it at the next month's weekly Famitsu issue, like around April 8th and whatnot, and they'll share more details. It was like a very early announcement, so I'm like, oh, I guess sure, why not? You know, and it'll probably get localized, and we'll see.
We got a few release dates for upcoming games and DLCs. Well, actually, this one isn't a release date, but more of a platform announcement that took us kind of by surprise. We got Monster Hunter Stories 2 will release on July 9th. And then day and date with the Nintendo Switch release, it also has a PC version. So I don't think this is like really surprising because we kind of learned through the back door that Monster Hunter Rise will get a PC version. And it just seems like with as much of a splash as World made on PC, it seems like smart for them. I know Monster Hunter Stories 2 is more of a Pokemon-esque RPG and less of a traditional Monster Hunter game. But I saw this and it was like surprising for like a split second. Like, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense. So I think the trailer for this looks really kind of fun. I've never played the original Monster Hunter Stories. Have either of you played it, or any of you?
I don't play any of them, to be honest.
I played them. They're okay. I don't really like the combat system in the first stories, so I'm hoping the hope is that it'll be a better battle system this time around. I'm waiting to see like what they haven't really shown what the combat system is in this game yet, but it's
this is when we need James here to share his views on the Monster Hunter. The expert's not here today.
But it's exciting, just a day and date with the PC release. They also showed off that the Stories 2 is going to have like multiplayer quests, like co-op quests and whatnot. So
it's going to get amiibo.
It's true. Oh wow, yeah.
What year is it?
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with amiibo these days, man.
AI for Smash. Can we confirm that Monster Hunter's in Smash?
No, aren't they in it? But like as the amiibo skins, costumes for the fighters, the Mii fighters. I think that's how far they're going to go with that. But sure, why not? I'm looking forward to it. I'll probably play it and see if it's cool.
We've got that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, the surprise RPG from early last year. Is its last DLC that we were expecting ended up being something that we weren't expecting. It's going to be a future Trunks, Mirai Trunks, whatever naming you want to use, focused DLC called Trunks, the Warrior of Hope, which means the full title ends up being this mouthful: Dragon Ball Z Kakarot Trunks, the Warrior of Hope. It's launching this summer. So focusing on like the events of that OVA. Is OVA the right term? I know some people call it a movie, but it's not quite a movie. It's like a special.
OVA. It's not really a full movie feature-length film. It's like a short OVA. Like there's two different versions. I guess you could say. You could say
the History of Trunks is what I wanted to say. Is what it's called. But yeah, it's I think people were expecting it to go maybe into Super or stuff like that.
Black.
Yeah, or the Black Arc or something like that. But nope, it's going to be History of Trunks, which I don't know. It's kind of seems like it's a safe choice. It makes
more sense because it says it's called Dragon Ball Z, right? So,
I remember when this game was first announced, people were surprised that it wasn't just generalized Dragon Ball; it was specifically branded Dragon Ball Z. Where it's like, okay, I guess that's kind of the crowd they're going for, the nostalgic. I watched this in middle school on Toonami or whatever crowd. So I kind of wish George was here because I feel like he's the only one that's truly interested in this. But I don't know, he had some pretty positive thoughts on the game. I mostly hear that basically the base game of Kakarot, it's like very front loaded, where by the time you get to like the later arcs, you can just feel the budget and inspiration just like fall out from under it. So
yeah, that's what I heard too. It's like an uneven experience. Like it had like so much potential with like the way they kind of meticulously crafted, like the Frieza arc, for example. It's like, oh yeah, this is great how they're showing this, like in cutscenes and whatnot. And it feels like I'm really participating in it. And then by the time you get to Boo, it's like, oh,
going through the motions.
Like I'm really into like Dragon Ball, like the manga and the anime, but I am not a fan of their video games. So I always ask you, did they actually get all the way to the Boo arc in this, or
they did.
I remember when this game was first announced, people were like dead sure that it would only go to Frieza because that's kind of like what they originally shown. And then eventually they kind of not leaked out. They marketed, nope, it's got androids. Nope, it's got Boo. But then it ended up being that those last two arcs were like really thin on the ground. And then the first two DLCs kind of touched into like some super boss fights, but that was pretty much it as far as I know. And they never really, because I guess those first two movies that got readapted into Super are actually branded as like Dragon Ball Z movies. So you're kind of like not
I still remember. I posted just one of the news updates on those DLCs, and I think I just mentioned casually like the first DLC is based off the the first arc in Dragon Ball Super, and they're like, one of the comments is like, no, it's based off the movie.
Like, okay. Actually, Battle of Gods is a Dragon Ball Z movie. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. You're technically correct, but come on.
You're technically correct. The worst kind of correct. So maybe we'll get George to talk about this once he's played it, and hopefully it ends up being a bigger deal than the first 2 DLCs. But I guess now we're kind of at the point where it's like, what's next for Dragon Ball, both in terms of anime, because they've got the manga still going, and I've heard people say that the current arc is actually decent, but I've heard that a few times before the current author, Toyo Taro.
They'll say it's good, then you're looking, I think they just overhyped it.
Well, I've actually seen in a few places that there's like a Toyo Taro cycle now where it's like, man, this premise is interesting. Wow, these characters are cool. And then it just like shits the bed. And then the next arc starts and then it's repeats. So it'll be interesting to see if those end up leaving the manga and showing up in either in anime or games. Dragon Ball Z Fighters 2. Will we start to see like Toppo and all the other characters eventually? We'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, they recently released like the last character of the season pass 2 of Dragon Ball Fighters. Like they had the Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, but they didn't announce anything else past that. So they might be, maybe, who knows? But they might be starting to sunset Fighters, and we'll see where it leads them. Like, I don't know if Arc System Works has time to work on Fighters because they're working on that Dungeon Fighter Online fighting game right now.
Man, they have their hands full. I mean, are they trying to release Strife in like 2 months?
Yeah, they recently delayed it to June, and they started to work on the season pass content for Strive as well. So, who knows?
I do wonder if that's like telling that the last character that they went to is they just went back to like the GT well, like then rather than like a new character. Like, oh, y'all like Gogeta, right? Super Saiyan 4 from the late 90s or whatever.
Like, they don't have much characters in the Dragon Ball franchise, to be honest. I think not like strong characters. Like they just don't want to go back with the original Dragon Ball because no one seems to remember them now. I mean,
I am glad that they did, instead of always escalating to like movie or new characters. They're like, you know what, Roshi deserves a spot, and then one of the second set of characters was a Roshi, and I'm like, you know what,
yeah,
I'm glad that they did that. That seems like valid. We also got a release date for Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit, and Wonder Labyrinth, which is the Castlevania-like, Metroidvania, whatever verbiage you dislike the least, is releasing on March 27th on PC. Right now it's available in early access. They've updated what's been available in the early access period a few times. We actually did a video on this late last year or middle of last year where James played through the early access of this game. And I think Chow was there too. So it's got a final release date.
I actually played for the early access as well.
So March 27th, it's not that long away. So 2 weeks from today, actually.
I'm excited to get the Switch port. Like I got the early access version just a few days ago because on discount. That discount's ended now, and I've been holding out to playing this game because I was like, I just want to play the full thing when it's out. I don't want to deal with the early access waiting for content.
I didn't realize the discount had ended. Oh no, I guess you can still get the discount. It's right now
until it releases.
So yeah, if you get it right now, it's $12.99 US, and then when it releases, it's going to be what, 20?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I got a question. That's like they released Luna Nights for the Switch, so I'm guessing there might be a Switch port on the rise. I just wonder.
So yeah, the developer of this game is Team Ladybug, who also released Toho Luna Nights.
Yeah, I got that bundle that had both the Record of Lodoss War and the Toho Luna Nights. They had like a bundle for it. I was like, I'll just give it a shot. They said because people are saying you can like have a blast with Luna Nights without being a Toho fan. It's just a good game. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, why not?
I think it's me with Toho. I enjoy the games, but I have no care for the story. The story is just kind of like nonsense. And
I don't care for any of the characters or any like some of the music is cool. Like they have like a lot of music, but I don't really care that much for it.
Involved in the lore. Yeah. Like the lore is just, I don't know what the hell is going on.
Team Ladybug is also responsible for that Shin Megami Tensei Deep Strange Journey bonus thing that they had in Japan. They had they created like a mini game for it called like SMT Synchronicity or something like that. They had like the Jack Frost as the main character, I think, and that was cute. And they also did
the Konosuba one at one point.
The Konosuba God's Blessing on This Wonderful World. It was like a Blu-ray bonus or something with one of the volumes in Japan as well.
We got a release date for the final DLC for The Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds Murder on Ariandos releases on March 17th. This is following up from Peril on Gorgon, which released last year. The last piece of content that we're aware of for Outer Worlds. So a game that I think we've all been kind of mostly lukewarm on, but I do kind of want to go back and play those two DLCs now that they're both going to be released. A few other tiny notes here. These are just mostly like sales milestones, and one other footnote for on a game that was announced in 2019. Loop Hero, which we talked about obviously at the top with Josh and Adam, sold 500,000 on its first week of sale. So it seems to have found definitely a pretty big audience, despite being kind of like an indie budget title on PC. So it's obviously pretty good. I think that's kind of due to the strong word of mouth that it's had.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened to spark this, but like that's it was one of those things like, oh, is this cool? Okay, I guess I'll give it a shot, and that's kind of what got me to try it.
Really impressive for a game that no one, or for a brand new IP, technically, right?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, it's by Devolver Digital published, like they usually publish pretty cool titles, so that just really had a hand in it. But it must have been like word of mouth or Twitch or something like that to really explode.
Yeah, just the PC space just seems to have like a lot of these things where like it depends on who gets to hold the megaphone, whether that megaphone is Twitch or Steam Discovery Tools or whatever, where games just end up like exploding. And it kind of in like a closed ecosystem where if you don't play on PC, if you're not like in that space, you might not hear about it.
Like Valheim, for example, like is like also the other one for this where they sold a bunch by now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, what's the Valheim total this week? Last I heard it was 5 million. Like, is it 6 million by now? I don't know. Potentially.
Platform. If you could get like some kind of like a Twitch streamer that's popular to play it, the game just kind of grows like randomly. Like, I mean, there's Among Us. I mean, that game came out like years before it got popular, and all of a sudden someone starts streaming it and just grew.
Another sales milestone, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim has totaled 400,000 physical sales and digital downloads. So
yay! That's a pretty good milestone.
I'm so excited to play that, but I just need to pick some time for it.
You can do it. It's only 30 hours. Only 30 hours.
Yeah, it's quote unquote not my type of game, but I enjoyed it immensely. So I'm going to vouch for it, and I don't play these sorts of things. It's a really good game, and you should make time for it.
I have never played a bad Vanillaware game in my life. I'll just tell you straight that.
Well, I mean, but there are certainly bad Vanillaware titles for sure. I mean, the original Odin Spear.
I still enjoy the storyline.
I still enjoyed it too, but I can't say that was like, I don't know if it's like a good game. It was a unique game, but I don't know. It was a good game. It was still okay. I liked it though.
We have a new development studio announcement for the upcoming undated Gothic remake. If you remember, back in 2019, THQ Nordic had like this playable teaser demo thing where there was like a vehicle for feedback on whether or not they should be making it. Then eventually they kind of quickly announced that yes, they were going to go through with it, but without any other details. They show back up this week, and basically said that, I hope I pronounce this right, Alchemia Interactive, which is a new studio based in Barcelona, Spain, will be developing the Gothic remake. They're now hiring for multiple positions. I don't know. This is always kind of interesting to me. I've never played Gothic. I have played Elex, which is from the same developers of the original Gothic. So I just think it's, always having more participants in this space of Western fantasy RPGs is always good. We don't want them all to be owned by Microsoft, right? So once this game, whenever this game ends up becoming more of a concrete thing, because it sounds like obviously if they're just now announcing the studio and still hiring, that it's probably quite a while away. But always good to have, more people in that space.
It's kind of funny because like Gothic, the original Gothic seems to be like a seminal action RPG if you were like grew up in Europe in the 90s, when did that original game come out? But it seems like there's like a certain contingent of people that this game is really important to them.
2001, so not quite the 90s.
2001, so not a little bit after the 90s, but like it seems like it's one of those types of games where it definitely has a following. So the fact that it's being remade might be really interesting to some people. Also, some people, I've seen people argue like this game didn't need to be remade, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, yeah, but when you mentioned that, it reminds you of like how the King of Fighters franchise is super big in Mexico. Like when you think about like the King of Fighters scenes, like Mexico is like a very like the King of Fighters series is like very important to Mexico, and like because it was just like right place, right time type of deal where like there's very fond memories and attachments to the King of Fighters series in that region, and like it's cool. You know, a lot like the competitive scene for King of Fighters is usually in Mexico.
I think the King of Fighter franchise is just as popular in China over like the Street Fighter franchise in certain areas because of all like the pirated cabinets.
Yeah,
they always had like King of Fighters like 97, 98, so it's like it just kind of grew more in popularity there, right?
Yeah, you just it was either super cheap or free, you know.
So the thing is that the playable teaser for this, I don't think got really great like response. Like it's like Steam right now says recent reviews are mixed. I guess all reviews are mostly positive, but I know some people played it and said like what Adam said, they're kind of like purists, where they're like, this doesn't feel like Gothic.
Apparently, one thing is that the main character in the original game, either I haven't played it, either doesn't talk or doesn't talk frequently. And apparently in the remake, they talk a lot, and some people are like, shut up.
Oh yeah, I can see that being a problem for sure.
In general, this is very broad, but I am a sort of person where like I do not need my protagonist to like mumble to themselves like, oh, there must have been a battle here. Like, are there signs of a struggle in the ground?
You know what game did a lot of this?
Horizon Zero.
I could name a bunch. Witcher, Horizon.
Yeah. Like I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that as long as they don't talk too much about it. I feel like certain stories sometimes less is more. So
yes, for sure. Has anyone here played Days Gone? I've heard like horror stories about like how Deacon like screams and like curses to himself or whatever.
I haven't seen it, but I've watched like streams of it, and yeah, that's a very talkative protagonist.
Here, how about this? In the new decade, let's give ourselves a like speech frequency slider for main characters, so I could just tilt it all the way down, and I don't have to hear them like chirping to themselves and like pretending the player is just dumb and needs that sort of guidance. This is a kind of breaking news that Adam or Josh will have to elucidate on a bit, but there was recent announcements, several, for the Metal Max series as part of the 30th anniversary live stream announcements. And I feel like I'm just going to hand this off right now before I butcher what was announced here. So, Josh.
Well, to be honest, they didn't really announce like a lot of like hard details. They previously announced Metal Max Xeno Reborn 2. Nothing about it, just that it exists. And now they've announced that it's going to be titled Metal Max Wild West. That's still all we really know. Like, okay, it's just the title. We don't really know anything else about it. It's coming to PS4 and Switch, but like, I guess it's a sequel to Xeno. But now that they changed the name, maybe it's not as direct a sequel. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
There is a new roguelike, which they previously announced as a project. I forget what the project name was, but now it's called Metal Dogs. And it's a roguelike featuring like the dog characters from Metal Max Xeno in like a mystery dungeon sort of style game. And it actually has like a Steam page, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's in English too, so it's going to get an English release, I guess, and like it'll come out as early access first. And this reminds me of like what they did with Katana Kami. That's the Way of the Samurai spinoff, and that was like an isometric roguelike that I reviewed. And like that was a neat thing. And this could be pretty cool. I mean, it's hard to say no to the premise of like you're playing the dog in an isometric roguelike. And it's like, okay, sure, why not? And
the third thing they announced was another Metal Saga project called Project Wolf, which all we know is nothing besides that.
Yeah, it's like
a logo. And then there's going to be a Metal Max, another stream on May 23rd that will probably release more details on all of these. Let me just say that I played Metal Max Xeno, the original release. It got a re-release in Japan. I don't know if it'll get one in the West. It came and went in Japan and no English localization. But I thought that game was not very good.
I'm trying to remember if they actually localized Xeno Reborn or whatever.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Metal Max Xeno released on PS4, and they did a Metal Max Xeno Reborn in Japan, which is on PS4 and Switch, I think. The main thing is that it actually changed the graphics engine, so it's like the same game, but with the new rendering engine, so it looks different, but it's kind of got the same stuff underneath, and maybe some other tweaks here and there.
It very slightly looks like more cel shaded-esque.
Yeah, but the one thing I will give the game is that you can customize your tank that you use, and that's pretty fun. You can build some really cool freeform tanks, and how you can control what your tank does and your sort of strategy there is honestly okay, but the rest of the game is just kind of really honestly pretty mediocre.
I hope this new Metal Saga project is cool. I really like Metal Saga. It's a very non-linear RPG that came out of PS2. And
when they say Metal Saga project, do they actually mean Metal Saga, the PS2 game? I like that one.
Yeah. Metal Saga was the PS2 game. Yes.
Wasn't there a game for the Super Nintendo as well that has a fan translation?
There's a few Metal Max games for the Famicom, Super Famicom.
Yeah. So
the thing is with Metal Saga that's weird is that the reason why they called it Metal Saga was because they couldn't use the name Metal Max at that time, but now they clearly can use Metal Max again because that's what they're calling these games, Metal Max Xeno. I'm not exactly sure what was preventing it there. You were probably just about to say this. You were probably just about to say this, but Metal Saga, kind of similar to Romancing SaGa 3 that I was talking about earlier in the podcast, it quite literally also places you on the map and just says all right, just pick a direction and go, figure out what's going on.
I mean, before you get to that point, you can just end the game too, because it starts off hey, your protagonist, his mom or dad, I think his mom asks, hey, do you want to become an adventurer? And you can say no, and then it'll just scroll credits, and there you go, you beat the game.
That's it.
30 seconds. But yeah, it's like you said, it's very much, hey, you're here, go pick a direction and go do stuff. Things will happen along the way, and you have to be not afraid of just letting things happen.
Kind of just have to. It does involve just a little bit of wandering and figuring out what to do. Which some people that maybe they just don't really want to do that. They want to just follow a storyline. But Metal Saga was definitely not that. So who knows if this new project will kind of take inspiration from that.
I hope so. I mean, I'd want to see a spiritual successor or to Metal Saga. It is such a cool, weird thing too. I have fond memories of it.
In Metal Saga, there's a spot in it where you fight I forget if they're zombified refrigerators or something. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, that kind of covers it for news of this week, at least that I have listed. Was there anything else outside of the RPG space that people were interested in talking about, or should we just start going off to sign-offs?
Sign-offs. I mean, the only thing left really is there's upcoming events the. Later this week, there'll be a Square Enix Presents the Spring 2021 showcase, and they'll unveil a brand new Life is Strange, which is exciting. And then they have other updates to Outriders is the upcoming RPG.
Yeah, this Square Enix Presents seems like it's more focused on Western Square Enix publishing. So we'll have to see how much of that actually falls into our wheelhouse. But yeah, that'll be on March 18th. So obviously we'll keep an eye on that and discuss it next week.
Balan Wonderworld.
Yeah. Hopefully the update to Balan Wonderworld here is we're delaying it indefinitely.
We're gonna fix this thing. And then looking ahead a little bit further, there is a PlayStation Japan Play live stream, which they've already stated will feature Resident Evil 8/Village and Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Now that'll be on March 21st, so it'll be the day after next week's podcast, so a little bit further out, but we might see some more details about Final Fantasy there and maybe some surprises. We'll see.
Play.
All right. Well, that covers us for the Tetracast this week. A bit of a lighter week, but we still got 2.5 hours out of it. So thank you, Loop Hero. Thank you, Kuro no Kiseki. You can always read any of the news stories that we talk about, as well as the reviews such as Gnosia, on our website at rpgsite.net. You can follow us on Twitter at rpgsite. You can listen to any other episodes of the Tetracast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and now YouTube. You can always visit our Discord channel by going to our homepage and clicking the link at the top. We also do post occasionally to YouTube at rpgsite.net. And other than that, you'll hear from us next week. So until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.